You open that door, Walker, and you're done here. Then I'm done. The pounding hit the steel door so hard the tool cart rattled 12 feet away. Ethan Walker's hand was already on the latch when Cole grabbed his wrist and hissed that the man outside was wearing a Hell's Angels vest, that he had blood on his knuckles, that the shop had closed 40 minutes ago, and rules were rules. Ethan looked through the glass at a man twice his size, who wasn't angry, who was begging. And Ethan let go of every safe thing he had left. He opened the door. If you're with me, hit that subscribe button and stay with this story all the way to the end, and drop the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story travels tonight. The clock above the parts window said 8:52, and Ethan Walker had 8 minutes left of a shift that had already taken more out of him than it paid. Walker. Dale Brunner's voice came from the office doorway, the way it always came, not called, just dropped like something he didn't want to carry anymore. You still on that Silverado? Almost. Almost isn't a word I can bill. Ethan didn't come out from under the truck. It's not the alternator. Invoice says alternator. Invoice is wrong. There was a pause, and in that pause, Ethan could hear Dale deciding whether it was worth the argument at 10 minutes to 9 on a Thursday. Dale Brunner was 56 years old and had owned Brunner Automotive for 19 of them, and in all 19, he had never once been wrong out loud. Charlie wrote alternator, Dale said. Charlie wrote alternator because the customer said the battery light came on. The battery light came on because there's a corroded ground strap behind the engine mount that costs $4. I'm not charging a woman $600 for a part that works fine. You're not charging anybody anything. I charge. You turn wrenches. Ethan rolled out from under the truck then. 32 years old, blonde hair going dark at the roots with grease forearms marked up like a map of every job nobody else wanted. He looked at his boss for a second too long, one full second, the kind that says everything and can't be written up. $4, he said, and she gets her truck back tomorrow instead of next week. Dale looked at him, then at the truck, then at the clock. Fix the strap, he said. Build the alternator. Ethan didn't move. Walker. No. Across the bay, Marty Ellis stopped wiping his hands. Cole Rhodes, 24 and still young enough to think workplace fights were entertainment, actually sat down on an oil drum to watch. Say that again, Dale said. I said no. Ethan stood up and his knees popped, and he didn't care. Her name's Roberta Diaz. She's a home health aide. She drives 60 miles a day to bathe old people who can't bathe themselves. I'm not taking $600 out of her hand for a part that isn't broken. You want to do it, you sign it. But my name's on the tech line and my name's not going on that. The shop got very quiet. Ethan expected to be fired right there. He'd been expecting it for 11 months. He almost wanted it. That was the ugly little truth underneath the thing he wouldn't say to anybody. He was so tired of being one man's property that some nights he came in half hoping for the axe, just so the choice would be made for him. Dale surprised him. Build a strap, Dale said, and walked back into the office and shut the door. Marty came over slow, drying his hands on a rag he'd already dried them on. You know what that was, Marty said. He got tired. That wasn't tired. That was him figuring out you're the only guy in here who can find a corroded ground strap without a computer telling him it's there. Marty leaned against the fender. He's not going to thank you for that. Men like Dale don't thank you for being necessary. They resent you for it. Then he can resent me from a distance. Ethan, Marty's voice dropped. Don't push him. I'm not pushing anybody. I'm doing the job. You're doing the cart right. That's the pushing. Marty tossed the rag to the cart. 19 years I've watched him. He don't want right. He wants quiet. Ethan stayed after. Not for Dale, not for the money there wasn't any. Brunner didn't pay overtime. He adjusted it, which meant it evaporated somewhere between the time clock and the check. Ethan stayed because the Silverado wasn't done, and because Roberta Diaz was going to call at 7 in the morning asking if she could get to work, and because he had learned a long time ago that the only thing in his life he could actually control was whether a machine ran when he was finished with it. Marty clocked out at 9:15 and stood by the door with his keys in his hand. You want a beer? I'm good. You always say that. I'm always good. Marty didn't laugh. How much you into him for now? Ethan's hands kept moving. Doesn't matter. Humor me. 26.4. Marty whistled low. Jesus. That's still your dad's? Most of it. Ethan, that hospital's never gonna. They sent it to collections 8 months ago. Collections sold it to somebody else. Somebody else sold it to somebody else. I'm getting calls from people who never met him asking me to pay for a man they never treated for a treatment that didn't work. He tightened the clamp harder than he needed to. So no, doesn't matter. It's not a number anymore. It's just weather. Marty stood there a while. He was proud of you, you know. Don't. He told me. Right here in this shop, the day he brought you in, when you were, 15? He said, that kid's gonna be better than me and he don't even know it. Marty jingled his keys. You still don't know it. That's the part that gets me. Go home, Marty. Marty went home. Cole didn't. Cole was on his phone in the corner waiting for a ride from a girlfriend who was always 40 minutes late, and Cole was the reason any of what came next had a witness. At 9:40, the rain started. It came in the way Colorado rain comes in, not building, just arriving like somebody turned it on. The wind shoved the bay doors. The lights flickered once came back. At 9:52, Ethan heard the motorcycle. He heard it before he saw anything, and he heard it wrong, and that was the part that made him stop with a socket in his hand. A Harley Road King has a sound, and this one had that sound for about half a second, and then it had a different sound, a stutter, a cough, a hard dead cut, then nothing, then the scrape of boots and a heavy machine being walked. Cole looked up from his phone. Then the pounding started. It wasn't knocking. Knocking is a question. This was a fist against steel 3 times hard enough that the tool cart shook, and then 3 more. We're closed, Cole yelled, not moving. The pounding came again. Ethan set down the socket. Don't, Cole said. Dude, don't. It's 5 to 10. Ethan walked to the side door and looked through the wired glass. The man on the other side filled the frame, big through the chest and shoulders soaked through gray, coming into a beard that had probably been red once. Late 40s, maybe 50, water running off him in sheets. Behind him, tipped against the curb, a Road King with the front end turned wrong. And the vest. Ethan knew the patch. Everybody in Colorado knew the patch. The Death's Head, the Rockers, the Diamond. He'd seen that patch in bars he'd walked out of, and in news stories he'd scrolled past, and in the specific way his father used to go quiet when a certain kind of engine came down the road. Cole was suddenly at his shoulder, breathing fast. That's Ethan, that's an angel. I see him. Don't open it. Through the glass, the man raised his hand, and Ethan flinched, actually flinched, and hated himself for it, because he thought the hand was coming at the door again. It didn't. It flattened against the glass. Open palm, not a fist, and the man said something Ethan couldn't hear through the steel. Ethan cracked the door 2 inches. The rain came through it sideways. We're closed, Ethan said. I know. Then, my daughter's in St. Luke's. The man's voice came out flat and fast like he'd already said it 4 times tonight to 4 other doors. Room 412. She went through the windshield of a Corolla on Sunday, and they've had her under twice, and they called me an hour ago and told me to come. Ethan's hand stayed on the door. Told you to come, he repeated. You know what that means? The man's jaw worked. When they call a tenant night and they don't say she's stable, and they don't say, don't worry, they just say come. Ethan knew exactly what it meant. He'd gotten that call on a Tuesday, 4 years ago, from a nurse who had a very kind voice and no information. I got no car, the man said. I got no ride. My phone's dead and I'm not. Something cracked in his voice and he stamped it back down like a man putting out a cigarette. I'm not asking for free. I got cash. I got $211 in a watch that's worth more than that. I'm asking you to look at my bike. Sir, 40 minutes. The man held up a hand, finger spread. I'm 40 minutes from her. I can be there by 11 if that bike runs. If it don't run, I'm walking, and if I'm walking, I'm not there till 3 in the morning, and she might not. He stopped. He looked away out into the rain, and his shoulders came up around his ears, the way big men's shoulders do when they are trying very hard not to come apart in front of a stranger. Please, he said to the parking lot. Behind Ethan, Cole whispered, Ethan, do not. Here's what Ethan thought about in the 2 seconds he had. He thought about the sign on Dale's office wall. No service after posted hours, no exceptions. He thought about the camera in the corner of Bay 2 that Dale checked every Monday like a man reading scripture. He thought about $26,400 and a job that was the only thing standing between him and a car he'd have to sleep in. And he thought about a hallway in Denver Health at 3:40 in the morning 4 years ago, and a plastic chair and a nurse saying, "Are you Mr. Walker's son?" and the way you can be standing up and falling down at the exact same time. He thought nobody opened a door for me, and he thought that's exactly why. "Cole," he said, "no. Go home." "Ethan." "Go home, Cole. You weren't here." Ethan pushed the door open. Theo. The man didn't come in right away. That was the first thing that surprised Ethan. He stood in the rain like a man who'd been told no at enough doors that he didn't fully believe this one. "You gonna look at it?" "I'm gonna look at it. Bring it in." Something moved across the man's face, fast, almost gone before it landed. "You know what this is?" He touched the vest with 2 fingers. "Yeah. And you're opening the door anyway." "I'm opening the door because you said room 412. Ethan stepped back. "Roll it in before the rain gets in my bay." They walked the Road King up over the lip and into Bay 2, and Ethan hit the lights, and Cole grabbed his backpack and left without a word, and the side door banged shut behind him. And then there were 2 men and a dead motorcycle and nothing else in the world. "Name's Jackson," the man said. "Ethan, you the owner?" "No." "He gonna have a problem with this?" Ethan crouched by the front of the bike. "Probably." "Then don't." "Jackson." Ethan looked up. "Right now, the only thing I want to hear out of you is what it did before it quit." Jackson blinked. Then for the first time, something in his shoulders came down a half-inch. "Stumbled," he said, and 20 miles back, like it was starving, cleared up. Then 5 miles back, it started missing under load. I'd roll it on and it'd cough. Then the lights went weird. Dash went dim, came back, went dim. Then it just quit. Middle of a lane. Ethan's hands had already started moving. Fuel line. Fuel line was warm. Fuel line shouldn't be warm. "Weird how," he said. "Dim. Dim like the battery's tired or dim like somebody's stealing it." Jackson stared at him. "What's the difference?" "About 4 hours." So, 20 minutes in, Ethan knew. He knew, and he didn't say it because you never say it right away, because the second you say it, people either explode or collapse. And he needed this man to do neither. He said, "When's the last time you had this thing on a lift?" "I do my own work." "That's not what I asked." Jackson didn't answer. "How many miles you put on it this week?" Ethan said. "I don't know." "Guess." "I don't know." Jackson. 1,100. It came out through his teeth. "Maybe 12. I've been going back and forth. Hospital, house, hospital. Her mother's in Pueblo. Her mother's her mother, and me don't." He stopped, restarted. "I've been sleeping in the chair by her bed and going home to feed the dog and coming back. That's what I've been doing since Sunday. On this bike. On this bike." Ethan wiped his hands. "Then here's the truth, and I'm going to give it to you straight, because you look like a man who's been handled enough this week." Jackson braced. Ethan watched him do it, watched a 50-year-old man physically get set for another blow. "This isn't one problem," Ethan said. "It's 2, and they've been feeding each other, and they've been doing it for a while." "Meaning what?" "Meaning your fuel pump's been going out for probably a month. It's been running hot and running lean, and you didn't notice because you kept your hand on the throttle instead of your ear on the engine. No shame in that, you had a kid in a hospital bed. But lean and hot cooks the pump. Cooked pump pulls more current. More current cooked something in your charging circuit. I'm guessing the regulator, I'll know in 10 minutes. And a bad regulator does not just quit, Jackson. It goes wrong. It starts feeding the system garbage. Spikes, drops. That's your dim dash." Jackson's face had gone very still. "So what you got," Ethan said, "is a bike that was starving itself and electrocuting itself at the same time, and each one made the other one worse, and tonight they finally shook hands. Fix it. Jackson. Fix it. I'm going to." Ethan held his eyes. "But I need you to hear the rest, because it matters. If you'd ridden another 10 miles on this, and you were about to, you were going to ride it to St. Luke's, that regulator was going to dump into your ignition, and the pump was going to give up under load, and you'd have lost the engine and probably the front end on I-25 at 70 miles an hour in the rain." The shop hummed. "You understand what I'm telling you," Ethan said quietly. "This thing quitting on the shoulder was the best thing that happened to you tonight." Jackson stood there. Then he turned around and put both hands on the workbench, and dropped his head between his arms, and his back went up and down twice, and he made no sound at all. Ethan turned to the parts shelf and stayed there for a solid 30 seconds, looking at nothing so the man could have his 30 seconds. When he turned back, Jackson was upright again, and his face was iron. "Can you do it tonight?" Jackson said. "I can do it tonight." "You got the parts?" And there it was. That was the real question, and Ethan had been dreading it for 10 minutes. "No," he said. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, this is a car shop, Jackson. We do Silverados and Camrys and the occasional Subaru with 190,000 miles and a dog smell. Dale doesn't stock Harley pumps. Nobody stocks Harley pumps at 10:30 at night." "Then what the hell was the last 20 minutes?" "The last 20 minutes was me finding out what's wrong so I'd know what to steal," Ethan said. Jackson went absolutely quiet. "Say that again." "There's a Road King in the back lot." Ethan wiped his hands slowly. "Been there since March. Guy dropped it off, never came back, never answered the phone. Dale's got a lien on it. He's been too lazy to file. It's got a good pump, and I'm 90% sure it's got a good regulator, because the only reason it's back there is the guy blew a transmission he couldn't afford. So take him. It's not mine to take. It's not his either. It's his enough that a judge would say so." Ethan met his eyes. "I want you to understand exactly what I'm about to do, because I'm not doing it by accident, and I'm not doing it and pretending I didn't. If I pull those parts, that's not a rule I'm bending. That's a thing my boss will call theft. There's a camera in that corner. It's been running this whole time. He watches it Monday mornings with a cup of coffee like it's church." Jackson looked at the camera, then at Ethan. "Then don't," he said. That more than anything else was the moment, because Ethan had been ready for a lot of things from a man in that vest. He'd been ready for threats. He'd been ready for money. He had absolutely not been ready for a Hell's Angel to look at a camera on a Thursday night and say, "Then don't," to be handed away out of his own daughter's hospital room and take it because a stranger might get hurt. "Say that again," Ethan said. "I said don't." Jackson's voice was rough. "I'll walk. It's 4 hours. I've done worse." "She's got 4 hours." Jackson's mouth opened, closed. "That's what I thought," Ethan said, and picked up a flashlight and walked toward the back lot door. "Hey," Jackson caught his arm. Not hard, but the man's hand went most of the way around Ethan's bicep, and Ethan was reminded distantly that if this went bad, it would go bad quick. "You don't know me." "No." "You could be doing this for a guy who deserves what he gets." "Probably am." "Then why?" Ethan looked at the hand on his arm until it came off. "Because 4 years ago, I got a phone call at 2 in the morning, and he said, and I was 40 minutes away, and I didn't get there in time, and every single day since then, I have thought about the 40 minutes. Jackson didn't move. "Now get out of my way," Ethan said. "You're burning them." He got soaked pulling the parts. He got the pump in 9 minutes and the regulator in 6, and he cut his knuckle open on a bracket and didn't notice until he was back inside and there was blood on the wrench. Jackson saw it. "You're bleeding." "I'm working." "Kid, I'm 32. You're bleeding." "Jackson." Ethan didn't look up. "You want to help talk? Because I've got about 40 minutes of work to do in 25, and if it's quiet in here, I'm going to start thinking about how quiet it is." So Jackson talked. He talked badly at first in chunks and stops. Then it started coming out of him the way it comes out of a man who hasn't been allowed to say any of it to anyone because everyone in his life expects him to be the one who doesn't need to say it. "Her name's Ruby," he said, and she's 16. She's a short, hard laugh. "She's smarter than me by a mile, which ain't a long walk. She's got a 3.8. She was going to do the running start thing at the community college in the fall, get her credits early. She had this whole plan on a piece of paper. Actual paper. Who does that anymore? Sounds like a good kid. She's a great kid. She's better than any of it." His voice went funny. "She wasn't even driving. She was in the passenger seat of a Corolla with a girl from her chemistry class going to get milkshakes. Milkshakes, man. That's the whole story. A guy ran a light on Federal and my kid went through a windshield for a milkshake." Ethan kept his hands moving. "She awake at all?" "Tuesday, for about an hour." "She say anything?" Jackson didn't answer for a long moment. She asked me if I was mad at her, he said. Ethan's hand stopped. She's laying there with 40 staples in her head, asking me if I'm mad at her. Jackson's jaw was shaking. Because I yelled at her Saturday about her grades, if you can believe that, about a B minus in a class I couldn't spell. And she went out Sunday with that girl, and now he put his fist against his mouth. That's the last real thing my kid heard out of me, he said. Some idiot in a leather vest hollering about a B minus. Ethan set the wrench down. Jackson, don't. Look at me. Don't. Look at me. And Jackson did, and his eyes were wrecked. My old man's last words to me were, don't forget to check the coolant. You know what I'd give to have him yell at me about a B minus anything. I'd give anything. Ethan picked the wrench back up. She didn't ask if you were mad because she thought you didn't love her. She asked because you're the person whose opinion she cares about most in the world. That's not the accusation you think it is. That's a compliment with a knife in it, and every parent gets one, and you're going to get to answer it. Jackson stared at him. You don't know that? No, Ethan said. I don't, but you're going to get to try, and that's more than a lot of people get, and I'm not going to let a fuel pump be the reason you don't. At 11:04, it wasn't done. At 11:04, Ethan discovered the thing he'd been afraid of, that the harness itself had cooked, that there was a section of wire behind the frame that had been quietly baking against a hot component for 1,000 miles, insulation gone chalky, copper gone dull, one strand already broken and shorting intermittently, which was the actual reason for the dim dash, which meant the regulator was a symptom and not a cause, which meant that if he just swapped the parts and sent the man out the door, the brand new regulator would have cooked in 50 miles and Jackson Reed would have been dead on the shoulder of I-25 with a receipt in his pocket. Ethan sat back on his heels and said one word very quietly. What? Jackson said. What? I found the real one. Is it bad? It's the reason. Ethan held up the wire. You see that? That's not a part. That's what a part did to something else. Everybody would have missed this. Every shop in this town would have swapped your regulator, charged you $400 and shaken your hand while you rode off to die. How long? 40 minutes to do it right. I don't have 40 minutes. 20 to do it wrong. Jackson opened his mouth, and here is where the night turned, and Ethan would think about it for the rest of his life because he handed the man the knife and let him choose. I can splice it, Ethan said. 20 minutes. It'll get you to St. Luke's. It'll probably get you there. And then in a week or a month, it'll do this again, someplace worse, and I won't be there. He looked up. Or I give you 40 minutes, and I fix it. Your call. It's your kid and it's your neck, and I'm not making that call for you two. Jackson stood there with rain still dripping off him onto a concrete floor. 20, he said. Okay. No. He grabbed Ethan's shoulder. Wait. Ethan waited. If I'm dead in a month, Jackson said slowly, who sits with her? Ethan didn't say anything. 40, Jackson said. Do it right. It took 51. At 11:31, Ethan's phone lit up on the bench. Dale Brunner. He looked at it. It rang out. 90 seconds later, it rang again. He looked at it again. You gonna get that? Jackson said. Nope. That him? Yep. How's he know? Cameras push to his phone if the bay lights are on after hours. Ethan said, stripping a wire with his teeth because his cutters were 3 feet away and 3 feet was too far. He set it up in 2019 because he thought Marty was stealing brake pads. Marty wasn't stealing brake pads. Marty was coming in on Sundays to finish jobs for free because Dale wouldn't pay overtime. Jackson stared at him, and he's got that thing pointed at you right now. He's had that thing pointed at me for 6 years. Ethan, Jackson's voice had changed. Ethan, hey, look at me. You're going to lose your Probably. No, hey. Jackson came around the bike. I didn't come in here to cost you You didn't cost me anything. Ethan finally looked up, and his voice came out harder than he meant it to because 51 minutes of adrenaline was starting to turn into something else. I opened the door. Me, you knocked. Anybody can knock. I opened it. So don't stand in my shop and take that from me, too. Jackson's mouth closed. I've been doing this 19 years, Ethan said, going back to the wire. You know how many times somebody's asked me to fix something that actually mattered? Not a leased Audi with a rattle. Not a guy who wants his check engine light turned off so he can sell the thing to his nephew. Something that mattered. How many? Once. Ethan's hands were steady now. Tonight. At 11:47, he closed it up. Turn the key, he said. You turn it. It's your bike. You built it, Jackson said. You turn it. And Ethan Walker, who had not been given a single thing by anybody in 4 years, stood there with a wrench in his hand and got handed that. He turned the key. The dash came up clean. All of it. Solid bright, no flicker, no stumble. He hit the button. The Road King caught on the first crank and came up into a fat, even idle that filled the whole shop and rattled the windows and sounded Ethan would swear to it smug. Jackson made a sound. It wasn't a cheer. It was the sound a man makes when the thing he'd already given up on comes back. Then he pulled out his wallet and started counting bills onto the bench with hands that wouldn't work right. And he was talking while he did it fast, half to himself. 211. I got 211 and the watch, take the watch. It's a real one, my old man's. Jackson. It's worth 800 easy, maybe more. I don't want it, take it. Jackson. What? Put it away. Jackson stopped. No, he said, put it away. You don't understand. I don't take things. I don't take things from people. That's not, your daughter needs you more than I need your money, Yathan said. And it's 11:48 and you're 40 minutes out. So you can stand here and argue with me about $211, or you can go be in room 412 at 12:30 in the morning when she opens her eyes. Jackson stood there with the cash in his fist. Then slowly he put it back. He walked the bike to the bay door, stopped, turned around. Ethan, go. What's your last name? Doesn't matter. What's your last name? Walker, Ethan said. Ethan Walker, now go. Jackson Reed looked at him for a long 3 seconds, looked at him the way a man looks at something he intends to remember exactly. I'm gonna say something, he said, and you're gonna think it's nothing because guys like me say things like this all the time and don't mean it. Jackson, I'm never gonna forget this. His voice was perfectly level. You understand me. Not this year. Not ever. Whatever this costs you, it's not gonna cost you. I don't know how yet, but it's not gonna cost you. And then he was gone, and the sound of that Road King going down the frontage road was the cleanest, healthiest, most right sound Ethan Walker had heard in 4 years. He stood in the empty bay for a while, then he cleaned up. He put every tool back, he wiped the bench, he swept the floor. He did all of it slowly and carefully the way you clean up a house you already know you're leaving, because he wasn't stupid. He walked over to the corner and looked up at the camera, the little black eye that had been open the entire night, that had watched him open a door he'd been told never to open, watched him pull parts off a bike that didn't belong to him, watched him give away 51 minutes and $211, and in about 9 hours his job. His phone said 6 missed calls, Dale Brunner. Ethan looked at the camera, and for the first time all night, he smiled a small, tired, unbothered smile. The smile of a man who has just spent everything he has, and for once in his miserable life knows exactly what he bought with it. Yeah, he said to the camera. I know. He turned off the lights. He picked up his toolbox. He went home. He got 3 hours. That was it. He laid down at 1 and stared at the ceiling until 4 and slept until 7. And when the alarm went off, his first thought wasn't, I'm fired. It was, did he make it? Room 412. 12:30 in the morning. He had no way to know. He didn't have a number, didn't have a last name that meant anything to him, yet didn't have anything but the sound of that Road King going clean down the frontage road and a man's voice saying, I'm never gonna forget this. He got up. He made coffee. He didn't drink. He put on the same shirt because the other one was still wet, and he drove to a job he was 90% sure he no longer had. Marty was standing in the parking lot, not walking in, standing. Smoking, which Marty hadn't done since his wife made him quit in 2014. Don't go in, Marty said. Morning to you too. Ethan, I'm serious. Turn around. Call in sick. Give it a day. Let him cool. He doesn't cool. He might. Marty? Ethan shut his door. In 19 years, has that man ever once cooled? Marty looked at his cigarette. No, he said. Then let's go. You don't understand what's in there. Marty grabbed his elbow. He's been here since 6. 6, Ethan. He hasn't been here at 6 since his gallbladder. He's got the office door open and the monitor turned around so everybody who walks past has to see it, And it's on a loop, you and that bike, over and over. He's not even watching it anymore. He's just letting other people watch it. Ethan stood there a second. That's theater, he said. That's a jury. That's theater, Marty, and I'm not going to be scared of a man doing theater at 6 in the morning. He pulled his elbow free, and it came out gentler than he felt. You coming? I'm coming. Marty dropped a cigarette. God help me. Yeah, I'm coming. The shop went quiet when he walked in. Not all at once quiet, which would have been almost funny. It went quiet in pieces. Ray at the alignment rack looked up and then very carefully didn't. The parts kid froze with a box in his hands. Somebody's radio was playing classic rock and nobody turned it down, which somehow made it worse. And Cole. Cole was standing by the coffee machine, and when Ethan came through the door, Cole's whole face did something complicated and ugly, and then Cole turned and walked into the bathroom. Well, Marty said, there's your answer. He's 24. He's a coward. He's 24, Ethan said. Same thing for a while. He got about 11 feet. Walker. Dale Brunner didn't come out of the office. He stood in the doorway of it the way he always did because Dale Brunner had figured out sometime around 1998 that a man in a doorway looks bigger than a man in a room. You want to come look at something? Not really. Wasn't a question. Ethan walked over. Everybody watched him walk over. And there it was on the monitor, exactly like Marty said, timestamp 21:58, grainy green, a man in a vest, a door opening, and Ethan Walker stepping back to let him in. That's you, Dale said. That's me. Say it. I just did. Say the whole thing. Dale's voice was almost pleasant, which was how you knew. For the room. Say I opened the door for a Hell's Angel at 10 o'clock at night after I was told, I opened the door for a father whose kid was dying at St. Luke's. The room made a noise, small, a shift of feet. Dale's face didn't move. Rewind, he said to nobody and did it himself. Because that's not my favorite part. My favorite part's coming up. Watch. Timestamp 22:41. Ethan walking out the back door with a flashlight. Timestamp 22:57. Ethan walking back in with a fuel pump in one hand and a regulator in the other and blood on his knuckle. Dale paused it right there, right on the parts. Now tell the room what those are, he said. Ethan said nothing. Come on, you're the smart one. You're the one who knows what everything is. Dale tapped the screen with one finger. What is that walker? That's a fuel pump. Off of what? Off the Road King in the back lot. Off the Road King in the back lot. Dale repeated and turned to the shop like a man who just won something. Belonging to who? To a guy who hasn't answered a phone since March. Belonging to who? Legally him. Practically nobody. You've got a lien you never filed and a bike you've been using as a shelf for 11 months. Ethan met his eyes. You want me to keep going or you want to skip to the part where you fire me? And here's the thing, Dale didn't take it. That was the first moment Ethan felt the floor move under him, and he couldn't say why yet, because he'd handed the man the exit. He'd wrapped it up in a bow. Fire me. And Dale Brunner, who had fired a kid in 2021 for putting a Pepsi in the customer fridge, just looked at him for a second too long and said, get to work. Ethan blinked. What? You heard me. Bay 2, there's a Tahoe with a shutter. Get to work. Dale, get to work, Walker. He turned around and shut the office door. Marty came up beside him about 4 seconds later, and his voice was very low and very fast. That's wrong. Yeah, Ethan, that's wrong. That man just had a captive audience in a video and he had you dead to rights and he put it away. Marty's eyes were moving. He put it in his pocket, man. He's saving it. Why is he saving it? I don't know. Guys like him don't save things. I know, Marty. Then what? I don't know. Ethan grabbed a wrench he didn't need. Go do the Corolla. He worked. It was the only thing he had. He put his head in that Tahoe for 2 hours and let his hands do what they'd been doing since he was 15 years old. And it almost worked, except that every 11 minutes, his brain would swing back around to a hospital room he'd never seen and a girl he'd never met, and his hands would slow down and he'd have to start the thought over. At 10:20, Roberta Diaz came for her truck. She was maybe 55 in scrubs, and she'd clearly come on her break because she kept looking at her phone. They said it's ready. It's ready. They said she looked at the invoice, and then she looked at it again, and then she looked up at him with an expression Ethan would think about later. This says $41. 4 for the part, 37 for the hour. They told me 600. They were wrong. No, she shook her head. No, honey, they don't get things wrong in that direction. What did you do? I found the actual problem. She stood there holding the paper. I've been driving that truck 3 weeks with the light on, she said. I don't have $600. I have $110 until the 15th. I've been praying about this truck. I don't say that to be dramatic. I'm telling you, I have literally been sitting in the parking lot at Cherry Creek Manor praying about this truck. It's $41, ma'am. Her chin went just once. What's your name? Ethan. Ethan what? Just Ethan's fine. She reached out and put her hand flat on his forearm, right on the grease, and didn't seem to notice or care. You keep doing that, she said. You hear me? Whatever it cost you, you keep doing that. And Ethan, who had already lost his job and didn't know it yet, said, yes, ma'am, and went back into the Tahoe so she couldn't see his face. At 11:15, Dale's office door opened. Walker, in here. There it is, Marty said under his breath. It wasn't there. It was worse. Dale had a legal pad and a calculator, and he didn't look up when Ethan came in, and he didn't tell him to sit. Fuel pump, Dale said, for a 2019 Road King. You know what those go for? About 600. 662. Regulators 290. Labor to put him back on that bike, 3 hours at my rate, that's 450. He punched it in. 1,402. Round it to 14. Ethan said nothing. And the bike's diminished, Dale said, was a complete unit. Now it's a parts bike. Let's call it 800. Call it whatever you want. 2,200. Dale finally looked up. You owe me $2,200. And Ethan laughed. He didn't mean to. It came out of him like a cough, one hard disbelieving bark, and it was the worst thing he could possibly have done, and he'd have done it again. Something funny. Yeah, Dale. Yeah, actually. He put his hands on the back of the chair he hadn't been invited to sit in. There's 140 grand of dead inventory rotting in that back lot. There's a Buick out there with 4 flat tires that's been sitting since the Obama administration. And this morning you got up at 6 o'clock and you did math on a fuel pump. That's my property. It's your garbage. Watch yourself. I saved a man's life last night. Ethan's voice didn't go up. That was the thing that landed. I want you to hear that because you keep saying pump, and I keep hearing pump, and neither one of us has said the real thing out loud yet. His harness was cooked. If I hand that bike back with a splice in it, he's dead on I-25 inside a month. So yeah, I took your pump, and if you rewind that tape and watch it 50 more times, that's still what happened. Dale sat back, and then he said the thing that told Ethan everything, and Ethan didn't understand it for another 9 hours. You think anybody's going to care about why, Dale said quietly. That's cute. Nobody's ever going to ask you why, Walker. They're going to watch 40 seconds of a video, and they're going to see a guy in a vest, and they're going to make up the rest themselves. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. Then fire me. 2,200, Dale said. Payroll deduction, 200 a check for 11 checks. Sign here. No. Then I take it to the police as theft. Take it. Dale's eye twitched. You don't have $220, he said. No. You don't have 200. No. You've got what a collections file 3 inches thick and a 9-year-old Ranger with a bad clutch. You've been in my file. Of course I've been in your file. Dale said it like Ethan was slow. Garnishment notice came here in April. Came to my office, Walker. I've had a piece of paper in my drawer for the 3 months with your daddy's hospital bill on it, and I never said one word to you about it, and you want to talk to me about kindness. And that landed. Because it was true in the ugliest possible way. Dale had known. Dale had sat on it. And in Dale Brunner's mind, that was mercy, that was generosity, and he'd been carrying it around like a favor he was owed, and now he was cashing it. So this is where you want to do this, Ethan said slowly. Right here, my dead father in your office on a Friday. I'm making you an offer. You're making me a leash. I'm making you an offer that keeps you out of a courtroom and keeps a paycheck coming, and you're going to stand there and be too proud to fire me. Sit down. Fire me. It cracked out of him finally, and out in the shop, somebody dropped something. You've been standing in that doorway for 6 years telling me what I'm worth. And now you got a video that proves it, and you won't do it. Why won't you do it, Dale? What's in it for you if I stay? Dale's face closed like a garage door. Get out of my office, he said. Ethan got about halfway through the door. Walker, he stopped. He come back, Dale said. What, the biker? Dale wasn't looking at him. He was looking at the monitor, at the paused frame, at the man in the vest. He gonna come back here? And there it was. That was the whole thing, and Ethan saw it, and something in his chest went very cold and very still. You're scared, he said. I'm not. You're scared. That's what this is. Ethan came back one step. You've been sitting in here since 6 in the morning watching a Hell's Angel walk into your building on your camera, and you can't fire me because if you fire me and he comes back looking for the guy who helped him and I'm not here, get out. You'd have to explain it yourself. Dale stood up so fast his chair hit the wall. You're on thin ice. I've been on thin ice since the day my dad stopped me bringing you business. Ethan pulled the door open. Difference is I just figured out you're standing on it too. He worked the rest of the day and nobody spoke to him. That was its own kind of thing. Not hostility, worse. Marty tried twice and Ethan waved him off both times because he didn't trust his own voice yet. Ray brought him a Gatorade at 2 and set it on the fender and walked away without a word, which from Ray was practically a hug. Cole stayed on the far side of the shop like Ethan was contagious. At 3:40, Ethan cornered him at the parts window. Cole, Cole. He put a hand on the counter, not on the kid. What did you tell him? Cole's throat moved. Nothing. Cole, I didn't tell him anything, man. He already had it. It's on the, what did you tell him? And the kid cracked so fast it was almost sad. He asked if you knew who the guy was. It came out in a rush too loud, and Cole immediately dropped his voice to a hiss. That's it. That's all he asked. Did you know it was an angel? And I said, yeah. I said, we both saw the patch. I said, I told you not to open it, and you opened it anyway. Okay. And he asked, did the guy threaten you? And I said, no. Ethan? I said, no. I told him the guy didn't do anything. I said the guy was just standing there. Cole, okay. But he kept asking, like 4 different ways. Like he wanted me to say the guy threatened us. Cole's eyes came up wet and furious in 24. Why do you want me to say that? Ethan stood very still. Say that again, he said. He wanted me to say the guy threatened us. He kept, did he raise his voice? Did he make demands? Did Walker seem afraid? And I kept saying no, and he kept asking, and finally he goes, think harder, son. And Cole's jaw shook. I said I had to go. You said no. I said no. I said no every time. Then you did fine. I didn't do fine. I ran into the bathroom this morning. Cole. Ethan gripped at the kid's shoulder. You were 24 years old in a room with a man twice your age holding your job, and he told you what he wanted to hear 4 times, and you said no 4 times. He shook him once. You did fine. Cole put his hand over his eyes. Why does he want it to be a threat? He said. Because a man who opened the door is a man who broke a rule, Ethan said slowly, working it out as he said it. But a man who opened the door because a biker made him, that's not a rule broken. That's a victim. That's an incident. That's something you file. File with who? And Ethan didn't have an answer. He didn't have one at 4 either, or at 5, or at 5:50 when the whole shop stopped at once because of a sound coming down the frontage road. 3 of them. Not 1, 3. And Ethan knew what they were before he was out from under the hood because you don't spend 19 years around engines and mistake that sound for anything else. Oh no, Cole said. Oh no, oh no. Ray was already backing toward the parts room. Somebody's hand went for a phone, and Dale came out of that office so fast he was still holding a pen, and his face had gone the color of drywall. Nobody move, Dale said, and his voice was about an octave off. Nobody, Ray. Ray, don't call anybody. Don't. 3 bikes rolled into the lot and shut down, and the silence afterward was enormous. Jackson Reed got off the middle one. He looked like he hadn't slept because he hadn't. He looked like a man who'd spent 18 hours in a plastic chair because he had. And he walked straight across that lot toward the open bay with 2 other men a step behind him, and every single person in Brunner Automotive stopped breathing at once. Ethan walked out to meet him. Ethan, Marty said, it's fine. Ethan, don't. Marty, it's fine. They met in the middle of the bay, and Jackson Reed put out his hand and Ethan took it, and Jackson pulled him in and got an arm around his back and held on for about 3 full seconds, and the man was shaking. She woke up, Jackson said. Ethan's whole body let go at once. She woke up at 4 this morning, 4:11. She looked right at me. He pulled back and his eyes were absolutely destroyed, and he didn't care who saw it. She said, "Dad, you smell like a gas station." Ethan laughed. It came out broken. That's the first thing she said. 6 days, and that's the first thing out of her mouth. Jackson's hands were still on Ethan's shoulders. And I said, "Yeah, baby, some guy fixed my bike so I could get here." And she goes, his voice quit for a second. He took a breath. She goes, "You gotta pay him, Dad." Jackson, 16 years old, 40 staples in her head, and she's worried about whether I paid the man. He was gripping hard enough to hurt. You know why she said that? Because that's what I taught her. That's the one thing I got right. You don't take from people. You never take from people. And I stood in your shop last night and took the biggest thing anybody ever gave me, and I walked out with my money in my pocket. You didn't take it, I gave it. That's not how it works. Yeah, Ethan said. It is. That's exactly how it works. That's the only way it's ever worked. Jackson stared at him. You told her about the B-, Ethan asked. And the man came apart. Just for a second, just a hitch and a hand over his mouth and a turn of the head. His two friends looked at the ceiling. Nobody in that shop said one word. I told her, Jackson said. First thing, I told her I was sorry, and she said, he laughed wet. She said, Dad, it's a B-, it's not cancer. And then she asked for a milkshake, and I about put my head through the wall. She's gonna be okay. Long road, long, ugly road, but yeah. He wiped his face with the back of his wrist, unashamed. Yeah, she's gonna be okay. And Ethan Walker stood in a garage where nobody had spoken to him all day and felt something in him that had been clenched for 4 years finally unclench. Then it was worth it, he said. Jackson's face changed. What was worth it? Nothing. Ethan, flat. What was worth it? It's fine. What was worth it? And that's when Dale Brunner made the single stupidest decision of his professional life. He stepped out of the doorway. He's not authorized to service motorcycles, Dale said. The whole shop turned. Jackson turned very slowly. Say that again. I said, Dale's voice wobbled and then found itself. And that was the thing about men like Dale. They always found it right at the moment it would cost them most. I said, he's not authorized. Whatever he did for you, he did without permission. And it's a liability for this business. And if that machine has any further issues, this shop is not. You're worried about liability, Jackson said. I'm stating he worked on my bike for 2 hours in the middle of the night with the rain coming in, and he didn't take a dime, and you're standing there in a polo shirt, worried about liability. I have $2,200 of parts. And Ethan said, Dale, and it was too late. Jackson's head came around. Parts, he said. Nobody moved. What parts? Jackson. What parts? He stole them off another customer's vehicle, Dale said, and Ethan watched him do it, watched him reach for the only weapon he had and swing it. Which is theft, which I have on video, and which I have been extremely generous about. You what? So if you want to have a conversation about who's been wronged here, you've been what? Generous. Jackson took one step, and Dale's whole body flinched. And Jackson stopped dead, and something went across his face, a flash of pure disgust at Dale, and at the flinch at the fact that a flinch was all he'd ever get. He put his hands up, palms out, and backed up a step. I'm not gonna touch you. Look at me. I'm not gonna touch you. That's what you want, isn't it? That's what you're standing there hoping for. Dale said nothing. 2,200, Jackson said. He reached back. His friend put a rolled bank envelope in his hand, without being asked, which meant they'd talked about it on the ride over, which meant Jackson Reed had come here with money. Jackson, don't, Ethan said. Shut up. He counted it out onto the fender of the Tahoe. Hundreds. It took a while and nobody breathed through any of it. 22, and here's 4 more for whatever else you dream up between now and Christmas. Jackson. There. He set the last bill down. Now he don't owe you anything. Dale looked at the money, and Ethan saw the exact half second where Dale Brunner realized he'd just been handed the worst possible outcome, because now he had his money and he had no leverage, and he had a shop full of men who'd watched a Hell's Angel be more decent than he was. That doesn't change what he did, Dale said. Jackson went very quiet. Say that one more time. It doesn't change what he did. This is a business. There are rules. I don't care who your daughter is. Don't. Jackson's voice dropped to almost nothing. Don't put my daughter in your mouth. I don't care what the reason is. When a man breaks, he saved my life. That's not, he saved my life. Jackson's arm came out pointing at the lot at nothing. That's not a figure of speech. You understand me? I'm not being dramatic. He found something in that bike nobody else would have found, and he told me straight, and if he hadn't, I'd have been scraped off the interstate, and my kid would have woken up at 4 a.m. to a room with nobody in it. He stepped back. And you're going to stand there and tell me about rules? Yes, Dale said, I am. And that was the moment Ethan understood, really understood, all the way down, that this was never going to be a fair fight because Jackson Reed had come here to make it right, and Dale Brunner had come to work, and men like Dale never lose fights like this. They just wait. Jackson, Ethan said, go. No, Jackson, look at me, go. He got in front of him, close quiet. Every second you stand in this bay, you're making it worse for me. You get that? You want to help me. That's how. Walk out. Jackson's jaw worked. That's not right. No, Ethan agreed. It isn't. You did the right thing, and it's costing you. Yeah, that's not how it's supposed to. Jackson, Ethan almost smiled. How old are you, 50? You've been on this planet 50 years and you still think that's how it's supposed to go. Jackson stood there a long time. Then he took out a pen, and grabbed a work order off the cart and wrote on the back of it and pressed it into Ethan's hand. That's my number, he said. That's my actual number, not the shop number, not a message service. That's the phone that's in my pocket. Jackson, you call it. He closed Ethan's fingers around the paper and his hand was enormous and it was shaking. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. I don't care if it's 5 years from now. You call that number and say your name, and there is nothing on this earth I won't do. It's a fuel pump. It wasn't a fuel pump, Jackson said, and he walked out. 3 engines came up and rolled out of the lot, and the sound of them went down the frontage road and faded, and nobody in Brunner Automotive moved for about 10 seconds. Then Dale picked up the money. He counted it. In front of everybody, he counted it twice and folded it and put it in his shirt pocket and buttoned the flap, and then he looked at Ethan. Bay 2, he said. You've still got a Tahoe. And it was Marty who had told him not to push Marty, who'd been there 19 years. Marty, who had 1 year left on a mortgage and a wife with a bad hip, who said, you son of a bitch. Dale turned. Excuse me. You heard me? Ellis, I would think 19 years. Marty threw his rag on the ground, actually threw it. 19 years I've cleaned up after you. I came in on Sundays. I came in on my anniversary. And that man just paid you $2,600 in cash so you'd leave that kid alone, and you took it and you put it in your pocket, and then you told him to go work on a Tahoe. Marty, Ethan said. No. Marty's voice cracked. No, I've been quiet 19 years, I get one. He pointed at Dale. You know what's wrong with you? It's not that you're mean I can work with. It's that you saw that whole thing. You saw a man crying in your shop about his daughter, and the only thing in your head was inventory. Dale's face was purple. Get your tools, he said. You firing me? Get your tools. Dale. Ethan stepped between them. Don't. You don't tell me. He's got a mortgage and 11 months to retirement, and you know it. Ethan's voice was low and fast and absolutely certain. You want to hurt somebody today, I'm right here. I'm the one that did it. Leave him alone. Silence. Fine, Dale said. And he walked back into his office and shut the door. And behind the glass, they all watched him sit down and pick up the phone. Marty was breathing hard. I shouldn't have done that. Yeah, you should have. No, Denise is going to kill me. He wiped his face. 19 years and I go in. Marty, Ethan gripped his arm. You should have, thank you. They both looked at the office. Dale was talking, not yelling, talking calmly with a pen in his hand and taking notes and nodding, and every few seconds he'd glance up at the bay through the glass and then back down. Who's he calling? Cole said from somewhere behind them. Cops, Ray said. He's not calling the cops, Ethan said. He got paid. There's nothing to call about. Then who? And that was the question that sat in Ethan Walker's chest for the next 14 hours. Through the end of that shift and through a night where he didn't sleep at all because he'd seen Dale Brunner angry 100 times, and Dale Brunner angry was loud. That man on the phone wasn't loud. That man was calm. He was still calm the next morning at 7:04 when Ethan clocked in and found him standing in the middle of Bay 2, not in the doorway in the middle, out in the open, which he never did, with a manila envelope in his hand and something on his face that wasn't triumph and wasn't anger. It was something much worse. It was relief. "Walker," Dale said, "come here a second. I've got the—" "Leave it?" Ethan walked over. "You had a good night?" "Not particularly." "No," Dale said. "Me neither. I was up till 1. He tapped the envelope against his leg. "You know, all day yesterday you kept asking me why I wouldn't fire you. Over and over. Fire me, like it was a dare." Ethan didn't answer. "You want to know the truth?" Dale's mouth moved into something that wasn't a smile. "I wasn't allowed to." "What?" "Thursday night, 10:15, my phone lights up because the bay lights are on. So I pull up the camera on my couch and there's a guy in a vest in my building." Dale nodded slowly. "And I did what you do. I saved the clip and I sent it out." Something started going wrong in Ethan's stomach. "Sent it where?" "And Friday morning at 6, I get a call," Dale said, "and it's not from who I expected. And they tell me, and I want you to hear this exactly right, Walker, because you spent 2 days acting like I'm the villain in your little movie. They tell me, don't touch him, don't discipline him, don't say a word to him, sit tight and wait." Ethan's mouth was dry. "Dale, who did you send it to?" Dale Brunner held up the envelope. "Corporate," he said. "Corporate," Dale said. Ethan looked at the envelope, then at him. "Dale, you don't have a corporate." "Don't I?" "You've got a shop. You've got 19 years in a lien you never filed and a Buick with 4 flat tires. That's what you've got." And Dale Brunner smiled. It was the worst thing Ethan had ever seen on that man's face because it was genuine. It was the smile of somebody who's been holding a card so long they've forgotten to enjoy it, and now here it was, and it turned out it still worked. "Walker," he said, "what's it say on your paycheck?" "What? Your paycheck, the stub, top left corner, under the address." Dale tapped the envelope against his leg slow. "You've been looking at that thing every 2 weeks for 6 years. What's it say?" Ethan's mouth opened, and nothing came out because he'd never read it. Not once. He'd read the bottom, right the number, the only part that ever mattered, and the rest of that piece of paper was just noise a man throws in a drawer. "That's what I thought," Dale said. "It says Brunner Automotive, a Reed certified service partner." The shop had gone quiet again. It kept doing that. Ethan was starting to hate the sound of it. "Since 2016, Dale said. "You want to know why I took the certification? Because I couldn't get parts anymore, because a little independent shop can't buy a warranty component in this state without going through one of the big 3, and Reed's the biggest, and they came around with a folder and a pen, and they said, sign here and you get the parts network and the training and the sign out front, and in exchange, you follow the standards." He shrugged. "So I signed. You know what year that was for you? That was the year you started. You've never once worked for me, Walker. Not for one single day. You've worked for them. You just never bothered to look at the top of the page." Marty had come up behind Ethan's shoulder. Ethan could hear him breathing. "Reed," Marty said. "Reed Automotive. That's the one." "Dale," Marty's voice had gone strange. "Dale, that's a company. That's like the 4th biggest—" "3rd," Dale said. "As of last year, 3rd. Ethan's brain was doing something ugly. It was reaching back through Thursday night, through the rain, through a man in a vest saying, "My daughter's in St. Luke's," and it was pulling one word out of all of it and holding it up to the light. Reed. Name's Jackson. He'd never said the last name. Ethan had never asked. He'd asked for a fuel pump problem and gotten a man's whole life instead, and it had never once occurred to him to ask the man what he was called. "Dale," he said, and his voice came out flat. "What's on that tape?" "What?" "You said you saved the clip and you sent it out. What's on it?" "You know what's on it. Is there audio?" Dale's eyebrows went up half an inch. Now that's an interesting question, he said. Why something on there you don't want heard? Answer me. There's no audio, Walker. $400 a camera, what do you want? He said it like it was a disappointment to him personally. Just picture, which, and he tapped the envelope again, that same little rhythm, and Ethan wanted to take it out of his hand and set it on fire. Works out fine, don't it? Because without audio, it's just a man in a vest and a door, and you carrying parts that ain't yours out of my back lot at 11 o'clock at night. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. Every frame of it's true. Dale's voice never went up. That was the thing. I didn't edit a thing. I didn't have to. I just sent it. Marty said very quietly, you sent a video of a Hell's Angel to a Fortune 500 company. I sent an incident report, Dale said, which the standards require. Section 14. Any unauthorized after-hours access to a certified facility gets reported within 24 hours, and I did it in 12. And if you want to look at it as something else, that's on you. And they called you back at 6 in the morning. They called me back at 6 in the morning and said, don't touch him, Ethan said. Dale stopped tapping. Yeah, he said. And there right there, Ethan saw it flicker across the man's face. Just for a second, not triumph, confusion. Because Dale Brunner had thrown a rock into a lake he'd been standing next to for 10 years, and the lake had done something he did not understand, and it had been eating him alive ever since. Dale, Ethan said slowly, who called you doesn't matter. Who called you a woman? What woman? Didn't give a name, Dale said. And for the first time in 2 days, he sounded like a man saying a true thing that scared him. 6 in the morning block number, and she knew my name, and she knew the certification number, and she knew what shift you worked. She said, don't discipline him, don't write him up, don't say one word to him, and sit tight. And you sat tight. For a day and a half, yeah. Dale's jaw flexed. In my own shop, waiting. And Ethan understood finally why Dale hadn't fired him Friday morning with a full house watching. It wasn't fear of Jackson at all. He'd been wrong about that. It was so much smaller and so much worse. Dale Brunner had been told to wait and had waited and had spent 30 hours hating every second of it and had come in this morning with an envelope because waiting had finally become more than he could carry. So what's in the envelope? Ethan said. Somebody's coming. Who? I don't know who. It cracked out of him, the first real crack in 2 days. They didn't tell me. They said today. That's it. That's what I got. A woman with no name says today, and I've been standing in this bay since 6:30 like a... He stopped himself. Like a what? Marty said. Watch it, Ellis. No, finish it. Like a what, Dale? And Dale Brunner didn't answer, and the answer was hanging there in the middle of Bay 2 so loud, you could have read it off the wall like an employee. At 9:15, the parts truck came and nobody unloaded it. At 10:40, Ray dropped a caliper and nobody laughed. At 11:20, Cole said out loud to nobody, I'm going to be sick, and went outside and stood in the lot for 6 minutes. And Ethan worked. He put his head into a Camry with a whine in the rear end, and he took that car apart with his hands, while his brain ran the same 40 seconds over and over the way you worry a bad tooth. Reed, it didn't fit. It couldn't fit. Because he'd looked at that man Thursday night, he'd looked at him hard, the way you look at somebody when you're deciding whether to let them into a building. And what he'd seen was a guy with cracked hands and a dead phone and $211 in his wallet, and a wife in Pueblo who wouldn't take his calls. That wasn't a rich man. Ethan had met rich men. Rich men didn't count out $211. Marty came around the fender at 11:35 with his phone in his hand and his face wrong. Ethan, not now. Ethan, look at this. Marty, look at it. He looked. It was a photograph, and it was 15 years old at least, and it was a man in a suit standing at some kind of ribbon cutting with a shovel in his hands and a hard hat that had never been on a real site. And behind him at the edge of the frame, half turned away like he was already leaving, was a younger man with a red beard. Ethan's hands went cold. That's him, Marty said. Tell me that's not him. Where'd you get this? Reed Automotive. 1999. It's on their own website. It's in the history section. Marty's voice was shaking, which was almost funny because Marty Ellis had never been excited about anything in his life. The guy with the shovels, Nathan Reed. He's the CEO. And the guy behind him, Marty is your guy. You don't know that. Ethan, Marty grabbed his wrist. How many red-bearded Reeds you figure there are? And Ethan pulled his hand back and put it on the fender and stood there for probably 10 seconds saying absolutely nothing because his whole chest had gone hollow. It doesn't make sense, he said. It makes perfect. It doesn't make sense, Marty. That man was broke. He turned around. You didn't see him? You weren't there. He offered me a watch. He offered me his dead father's watch because he had $200 and he thought $200 wasn't enough. You don't do that if you can pick up a phone and have a helicopter. Marty's mouth opened, closed. Then why do you have $2,600 in cash yesterday? And Ethan didn't have an answer for that either. Diane Kessler got there at 12:50. She didn't come in like corporate. That was the first thing that threw him. She came in through the customer door like a person who needed an oil change, and she stood at the counter for probably 40 seconds before anyone even noticed her. And when Dale came out of the office, his whole body changed shape. Ma'am, are you Diane Kessler, Reed Automotive Field Standards? She put a card on the counter and didn't offer her hand. You're Brunner. I am. I've been expecting. Where's Walker? Dale's mouth stayed open on the rest of his sentence. Bay 2, he said. Is there an office? Mine's right. Not yours, she said. There was a break room. It had a table with a burn ring on it and a coffee maker Marty had bought with his own money in 2011, and that's where Diane Kessler sat down and put a laptop on the table and looked at Ethan Walker for the first time. She was maybe 45. She had a bad cold or something like it, and she kept clearing her throat, and there was a lanyard around her neck she never once looked at. Sit down. He sat. You know why I'm here? No, ma'am. You don't? No, ma'am. I know a lot of people think they know why you're here. I don't. She looked at him for a second. Do you know what company you work for? Found out about 6 hours ago, and that got her. Just a flicker, her chin came up about 1/8 of an inch. Say more. I've been here 6 years. I've never read the top of my pay stub. That's not a joke, and it's not an excuse. That's just what's true. He put his hands flat on the table because he didn't know what else to do with them. So no, ma'am. Until this morning, I thought I worked for Dale Brunner. She turned the laptop around, and there it was again. Grainy green, timestamp 21:58, a door opening. That's you. That's sweet. And tell me what I'm looking at. You're looking at me opening a door I was told not to open. She stopped it. She actually stopped the video, and her finger came off the trackpad and she looked up at him. That's an interesting way to start, she said. It's the true way to start. Most people start with a reason. You didn't ask for a reason. You asked what you were looking at. Diane Kessler sat back in her chair. All right, she said. Then I'm asking, why'd you open it? He said his daughter was in room 412 at St. Luke's, and they'd called him at 10 at night and told him to come. You believe that? Yes, ma'am. Why? Because I've gotten that call, Ethan said. She didn't write anything down. That was what unnerved him. She just sat there with her hands folded and the laptop humming, and a look on her face he could not read at all. Mr. Walker, I'm going to be direct with you because I've read the file and I've watched 41 minutes of this footage, and I have a plane at 6. She cleared her throat. The door I don't care about. Nobody cares about the door. Do you know what's in the file? No. 2 things. She held up a finger. 1 matam. You removed 2 components valued at $952 from a vehicle in this facility's custody, which under our standards is not called borrowing. It's called conversion, and it's the kind of thing that ends certifications, and it's the kind of thing that ends careers, and it doesn't matter how good the reason was. Ethan said nothing. 2, second finger. In the last 11 months, you have personally written down 43 invoices below quoted. 43. The average reduction is $381. She turned the laptop back around and looked at it. Diaz Roberta, quoted 612, billed 41. Ethan's stomach turned over. That was yesterday, he said. That was yesterday. How was that already? Because he sent it yesterday, she said, and Ethan closed his eyes. He sent me the video Thursday night at 10:19 p.m. Kessler said. And then he sent me a spreadsheet Friday at 4:52 p.m. And I want you to understand what that means, Mr. Walker, because I think you're smart, and I think you're tired, and I think you're about to be stupid. That spreadsheet is the real complaint. The biker's the rapper. He gave me 40 seconds of a Hell's Angel because he knew it would make somebody open the email. And then underneath, he gave me 11 months of you costing him $16,000. And he built it so that when I got here, I'd already be angry. Ethan opened his eyes. His voice didn't work right. He tried again. Ma'am, every one of those 43, I know. Every one of them. The quote was wrong. Charlie writes quotes off what the customer says on the phone. He's never touched a car in his life. He types what he hears, and then it's on paper, and then it's true. And then I put the thing on a lift, and it's a ground strap, and I'm supposed to charge her $600 for an alternator that works fine because Charlie wrote it down. I know, Kessler said. So what am I supposed, Mr. Walker? Well, so what am I supposed to do? Look at a woman in scrubs and, Mr. Walker. He stopped. I said I know. She was rubbing her eyes. I pulled the parts records before I got on the plane. I have 43 invoices where you wrote it down, and I have 43 parts orders that were never placed, which means you were right 43 times. Do you understand what that number does to me? He didn't. It means for 11 months, she said. This facility has been quoting alternators and selling ground straps, and the only reason it hasn't been happening is you. The break room got very quiet. Then, Ethan's throat was dry. Then why am I in here? Because that's not my question. She shut the laptop. My question is why you took the parts. I told you why. You told me the reason. I'm asking why you. She leaned forward. There were 3 other mechanics in this building Thursday. 2 of them clocked out. 1 of them went in the bathroom. You had the same information they had. You had more to lose than any of them, and you're the one who walked into the back lot at 11 at night in the rain. So, why you? And Ethan Walker sat there in a break room with a burn ring on the table and heard himself say a thing he had never said out loud to anybody. Not to Marty, not to a doctor, not to the empty side of a bed. Because I was 40 minutes away, he said. From what? My father. His hands were flat on the table and they weren't shaking, which surprised him. 4 years ago, Denver Health. They called me at 2:04 in the morning and said, come, and I was in Fort Collins on a job, and I drove 85 the whole way, and I got there at 2:47, and he'd gone at 2:31. He breathed. 16 minutes. I've done that math about 9,000 times. 16 minutes. Kessler didn't move. So when a man stands at my door and says 40 minutes, Ethan said, I don't hear a rule, I hear a clock. And I know exactly what's on the other side of it, and I'm not, his voice went, and he got it back. I'm not going to stand in a dry building and let another man drive that road when the only thing between him and his kid is a fuel pump on a bike nobody's coming back for. Diane Kessler sat there for a long moment. Then she cleared her throat hard twice. Okay, she said. Okay, what? Okay, Mr. Walker. She stood up and picked up the laptop. Stay off the floor. Don't clock out. Don't leave the property. I need 40 minutes with Bruner. Ma'am. 40 minutes, she said and walked out. She got 22. Ethan knew because he watched the clock because there was nothing else to do. He sat in the break room and listened to a Camry get worked on badly by somebody who wasn't him and watched a clock, and at exactly 22 minutes, the office door came open so hard it hit the wall. Walker! Marty was on his feet before Ethan was. Don't go out there. Marty? Ethan, don't. Walker, get out here. He went out. Dale Brunner was standing in the middle of the shop with his face the color of raw liver and a piece of paper in his fist, and Diane Kessler was 2 steps behind him with her mouth open saying, Mr. Brunner, we are not finished. You're terminated, Dale said. The whole shop stopped. Effective right now. Get your box. Get out. Mr. Bruner, Kessler's voice went up. Do not. Or what? Dale spun on her. Or what, lady, huh, you want to tell me? Or what? He was almost laughing, and it was the worst sound in the world. You've been in my building 3 hours. You went through my invoices. You sat in my break room with my mechanic for 40 minutes, and you didn't say one word to me about the biker. Not when you sat down and you asked me why my quotes don't match my parts orders. Because they don't. You asked me about Charlie. Because your quoter has never held a wrench, and you knew it when you hired him. It's my shop. It is not your shop, Diane Kessler said. It's got my sign on it. And there it was. Ethan watched it hit the man, watched 19 years crack straight down the middle in about a second and a half because Dale Brunner had spent all of those years standing in a doorway making sure everybody understood who owned the room, and a woman with a cold had just said the one true sentence he had been running from since 2016. "He stole from me," Dale said. "Mr. Brunner, he stole from me. He's on video." "You were paid," Kessler said, "in cash. Yesterday, $2,600 in front of your entire staff, which 4 separate people have now told me about in the last 20 minutes without me asking." She took a step. "Where's the money, Mr. Brunner?" Dale's mouth opened. "Where's the money?" she said. "It's not in the drawer. It's not in the deposit. It's not on a receipt. There's no line item on that bike's file, so where is it?" Dale's hand went just barely, just a flinch, an inch toward his shirt pocket, and every man in that building saw him do it. "Oh, Dale," Marty said softly, "that's not—" Dale's voice had gone somewhere thin. "That's restitution. That's mine. That's for your parts," Kessler said, "which were on a customer's vehicle, in your custody, under my sign." She was flipping through something on the laptop fast, and she wasn't even looking at him anymore. "Which makes it the customer's money, Mr. Brunner. Which makes it a payment you accepted on a vehicle in custody and never entered. That's not a certification issue. That's not even a read issue. That one's got a different phone number entirely." And that was when Dale Brunner did the thing. He turned to Ethan, not to Kessler, to Ethan, like a drowning man reaching for the only thing in the water that was his own size. "Tell her," he said. Ethan stared at him. "Tell her he threatened you." Dale's eyes were bright and wet and absolutely gone. "Thursday night. Tell her he made you open that door. You were scared, Walker. Anybody would have been scared. He was a big guy. He's a Hell's Angel. He came pounding on the door at 10 o'clock at night. You did what anybody'd do." "Dale, and I'll back you." He was nodding fast, selling it. "I'll back you 100%. You were a victim. That's a whole different matter to report. That's an incident. That's not you don't lose anything. You don't lose anything. You just say the man scared you and this whole thing goes away." The shop was silent. "That's what you wanted from Cole," Ethan said. "What? Friday, you asked him 4 times. Did he raise his voice? Did he make demands? Did Walker seem afraid?" Ethan's voice was very calm and he could hear it from far away. "The kid said no 4 times. He's 24 years old and he was scared out of his mind, and he said no 4 times. Dale's face went slack. "You want me to say, a father who was crying in your bay about his daughter threatened me," Ethan said, "to save your certification. I want you to say what happened." "I've been saying what happened. Nobody's liked it yet." "Walker," Dale grabbed his arm, grabbed it. "You do this and I will make you lead tech. Today. Right now. I'll put it in writing. 28 an hour. I'll pay the garnishment. I'll pay the whole thing 26.4. I'll write the check. Today I've got it." And Ethan looked down at the hand on his arm. "You've had that money the whole time," he said. "What?" "You've been sitting on my father's bill in your drawer since April." Ethan's voice never rose, not once. "You knew what I owed to the dollar, and in 6 years you never gave me a raise. And yesterday you tried to take $2,200 out of my checks over a fuel pump, and right now, with your certification on the table, you've suddenly got 26 grand. Dale's hand came off him. "So you had it," Ethan said. "You had it the whole time. And the only thing that ever made it worth spending was you needing something." "Ethan, say it then. Say the sentence." "Walker, I'll pay off your dead father's medical debt if you'll tell a company that a grieving man threatened you." He waited. "Say it out loud. Go on. Nobody in here is going to say it for you." Dale Brunner didn't say it. He stood in the middle of his own shop with his mouth working and nothing coming out, and 40 years of standing in a doorway went out of him all at once, and what was left was just a 56-year-old man in a polo shirt. "Get your tools," he said. "Mr. Brunner," Kessler said. "Stop talking. Get your tools." "Mr. Brunner, I am telling you as a representative of, it's my shop, and I said get your tools." And Diane Kessler shut her mouth. That was the part Ethan didn't understand until later. She shut her mouth. She looked at Ethan, and she looked at Dale, and she made some kind of decision behind her eyes, and she said nothing at all. So Ethan got his tools. He did it slowly because he wasn't going to give the man a fast exit, and because his hands weren't quite right. Drawer by drawer, 6 years. Some of those wrenches had been his father's. There was a 3/8 ratchet in there, with W scratched into the handle that had been turning bolts in Colorado since 1987. Marty followed him the whole way, hovering useless. This isn't over. Marty. It's not over. She's standing right there. She's from Ethan. She's from corporate. She's not going to let... She let it, Ethan said. That shut him up. Look at her. Ethan didn't look at her. He kept loading the box. She's standing there with a laptop watching me pack. She could have said one word. 10 seconds ago, one word and it stops. She didn't say it. He shut a drawer. So she let it. There's got to be a reason. There's always a reason, Marty. He picked up the box and it was heavy, and he was glad because it gave his arms something to do. That's the thing about people like her. There's always a reason, and it's never about you. Cole was at the door. He was standing in the way, and his eyes were red, and he had his hands out like he was going to stop a truck. Ethan, move, buddy. I told him no. The kid's voice broke in the middle. I told him no 4 times, I swear to God, I swear on. I know you did. I know you know, but I ran into the bathroom and I let you walk in here Friday morning by yourself, and I stood by the coffee machine and I watched you. Cole, and you're the only one in this whole place who ever taught me anything. You're the only one who ever... Cole. Ethan set the box down, put both hands on the kid's shoulders. Listen to me. Are you listening? Cole nodded, wrecked. In about a month, Ethan said, somebody's going to come in here and Charlie's going to quote him an alternator. And you're going to put it on the lift, and it's going to be a ground strap. And you're going to have about 4 seconds to decide who you are. He shook him once. You already know what you're going to do. You proved it Friday 4 times. Cole put his face in his hands. Ethan picked up the box and went out. He got 11 steps into the parking lot. Walker. Diane Kessler. He didn't stop. Mr. Walker, I need you to... Ma'am, he said, still walking with respect. You had one word. You didn't use it. So whatever you need, you can put it in the file. Don't get in the truck. He got in the truck. It took him 3 tries to get the key in, and he sat there for a second with his hands on the wheel, and the whole thing came up out of him at once. Not tears worse than that. A kind of shaking he couldn't stop because he was 32 years old and unemployed and $26,000 in the hole, and he had just been fired in front of every man he knew for 51 minutes for a bike, for a stranger, for a door. He'd meant it Thursday night. Every word. It just turned out you could mean it all the way down and still end up sitting in a 9-year-old Ranger in a parking lot with a toolbox on the seat beside you and absolutely nothing else. His phone rang. He almost didn't look. It rang 4 times and he almost let it go because the only people who called him were people who wanted $26,000, and he had already had the worst possible version of this day. He looked. Denver card number he didn't know. He answered it because he had nothing left to protect. Yeah. Is this Ethan Walker? A man's voice, older. Careful. Who's this? Mr. Walker, my name is Nathan Reed. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Reed Automotive Corporation. A pause. I'm told you were terminated about 4 minutes ago. Ethan sat very still. 4 minutes ago, he said, how do you... Because Diane's standing in your parking lot on the other line. And she's furious with me, Nathan Reed said. And she has every right to be because I told her not to stop it. Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. You told her. I did. You told her to let him fire me. I told her not to intervene, Nathan Reed said, which is the same thing. And I'm not going to insult you by pretending it isn't. Why? Because I needed to know something, Reed said, and there was exactly one way to find out. Know what? It came out of Ethan louder than he meant. What was there to know? I told her the truth. I told her every bit of it. I sat in that break room and I told her about my father. What else was there to? Whether you'd take it. Ethan stopped. He offered you the money, Reed said quietly. Didn't he, in front of everyone? The lead tech job, the raise, your father's debt. Ethan couldn't speak. $26,400, Nathan Reed said. To say a man threatened you. And you were standing in a room where every single person would have backed the lie, and the man you'd be lying about would never even have known. And you'd have kept your job and your tools and your dignity in front of your friends, walked out of there clean and whole, and paid. The parking lot was completely silent. And you said no, Reed said. In 11 seconds. I've got it on Diane's phone. She started recording the minute he grabbed your arm. Ethan's eyes were burning and he didn't care. That's why nobody stopped it, Nathan Reed said. I'm sorry, that's the whole reason. Diane wanted to end it an hour earlier, and I told her to let it run because I have spent 4 years watching men in that company do the right thing right up until the second it cost them something. And I couldn't ask you. You can't ask a man that question. He'll always tell you yes. Mr. Reed. So I let it cost you, Reed said. And I'll carry that, but I know now. Ethan put his hand over his eyes. Why do you care, he said. Why does a man like you care what happens in a shop in a strip lot outside Denver on a Saturday? There was a long pause on the line. Long enough that Ethan thought the call had dropped. Mr. Walker, Nathan Reed said, and his voice had changed completely. It wasn't careful anymore. It was something else, something raw. Thursday night at around 10 o'clock, you opened a door for a man who told you his daughter was in room 412 at St. Luke's. Yes, sir. Did he tell you his name? He said Jackson. Did he tell you his last name? No, sir, I never asked. No, Nathan Reed said. You never asked. Do you understand that in 51 minutes you never once asked that man his last name? It didn't matter. It matters to me, Reed said, and his voice cracked straight through the middle, and Ethan Walker sat up in his truck. Mr. Reed, Jackson Reed is my brother, Nathan said. Ethan couldn't hear anything. There was a sound in his ears like the shop had come back. He's my baby brother. He's 50 years old and he hasn't spoken to me in 11 years, and I have not been allowed within 100 miles of him since our mother's funeral. Reed's breath came uneven down the line. And Ruby is my niece, Mr. Walker. She's 16 years old, and she went through a windshield on Federal Boulevard on Sunday, and I found out on Tuesday from a hospital administrator because I'm not on the list. I'm not on the list, Mr. Walker. I own 1,100 service centers in 41 states, and I could not get into a room with my own brother's child. Ethan's hand was shaking. And Friday morning at 4 a.m, Nathan Reed said, for the first time in 11 years, my phone rang. Sir. And it was him, and he was crying so hard I couldn't understand him. And I thought, God help me. I thought she was gone. I thought that's what the call was. He stopped, breathed. And what he was trying to say to me was, Nate, she woke up. She woke up and I was there. I was in the chair when she opened her eyes. Ethan pressed the heel of his hand against his mouth. And then he said, and the only reason I was in that chair is a kid in a garage opened a door. Silence on the line. Mr. Walker, Nathan Reed said, at 6 o'clock Friday morning, I called my own field standards director and told her not to let anybody touch you. Do you know why I couldn't tell her more than that? Because I didn't have a reason yet. I just had my brother's voice in my ear at 4 a.m. for the first time in 11 years, saying somebody had been decent to him for no reason at all, and I was not going to let that person get fired before I could find out who he was. Ethan tried twice before anything came out. He said he was broke, he said. He offered me his father's watch. That's our father's watch, Nathan Reed said, and he is broke. He's been broke since 2015, and it's my fault, and that's a longer conversation than a phone call in a parking lot. A breath. Mr. Walker, where are you right now? Sitting in my truck. With your toolbox. Yes, sir. How much of that 26.4 is left? All of it. Right, Nathan Reed said. Then here's what's going to happen. There's a woman standing about 40 feet from your truck, holding a laptop, and she's been trying to get your attention for the last 6 minutes, and I would consider it a personal favor if you'd roll your window down. He rolled the window down. Diane Kessler stood there with her laptop under one arm and her phone in her hand and her face absolutely stripped of whatever she'd been wearing for the last 3 hours. He's still on with you? Yeah. Hang up on him. Ethan blinked. What? Hang up on him. Not forever, 10 minutes. She put her own phone in her pocket without ending the call, which he understood later was the closest thing to an apology Diane Kessler had in her. Because if you're going to be angry at somebody, Mr. Walker, you should be angry at me. He gave the order from a conference room in Denver. I'm the one who stood in that shop with my mouth shut and watched a man pack a toolbox. Ethan looked at her. Mr. Reed, he said into the phone, I'll call you back. Mr. Walker, he hung up on the third biggest automotive company in America. Okay, he said. Kessler exhaled. You want to yell at me? No, ma'am. You should. Yeah, he said, probably. She stood there a second, and then she did something that surprised him more than anything else that day. She walked around the front of his truck and opened the passenger door and moved his toolbox onto the floorboard and sat down in his truck like it was hers. Ma'am, 22 years I've done this job, she said. You know what field standards is? It's the department that goes to shops and takes signs down. That's it. That's the whole thing. I've closed 160 facilities. I'm very good at it, and I'm very tired of it. She stared out the windshield. I got the email Thursday night at 10:19. I read it at 5 a.m. Friday because I read them all at 5 a.m. And at 5:40, I put in the recommendation to pull Bruner's certification. Friday morning, before you ever heard my name. On the biker video, on the spreadsheet, she turned. Mr. Walker, I want you to hear this because you've spent 2 days thinking you're the story. You're not. You've never been the story. I have been trying to close that shop since 2022. Do you know how many complaints I've got in a folder with that man's name on it? 31. Do you know how many of them stuck 0? You know why? No. Because every single time a customer called us screaming about a $600 alternator, the invoice came back $41. She let it sit. Every time. For 11 months. There was never any damage, so there was never any case. He'd quote them a crime, and then you'd go out there and quietly do the honest thing and hand them the paper, and the customer would be so relieved they'd never call back, and my file would close. Ethan felt something turn over in his chest. I was protecting him, he said. You were protecting them, Kessler said. That's the thing you were going to have to sit with, and I'm sorry, but it's true. And you'd figure it out at 2 in the morning anyway, and I'd rather you hear it in daylight. You saved 43 people $381 apiece, and every one of those saves erased the evidence. He put his hands on the wheel. Ma'am, what was I supposed to do? Let him get robbed so you could have a paper trail? I don't know. That's not an answer. No, she said. It isn't. I've been doing this 22 years and I still don't have one. And anybody who tells you they do is selling something. They sat there. He fired me anyway, Ethan said. So it didn't matter. The whole thing didn't. He fired you at 1:41 in front of 11 witnesses, including a corporate representative, 40 minutes after being informed of an open standards review. Kessler's mouth moved. Mr. Walker, in 22 years, I have never had one hand himself to me like that. He did in 90 seconds what I couldn't do in 4 years. He retaliated in front of me. I didn't need a word. I needed him to do it. Ethan sat up. That's why you didn't stop it. That's part of why I didn't stop it. The other part's what Nathan told you, and I hate it, and we're going to have a conversation about it that you won't get to hear. She opened her laptop on her knees. But no, if I'd said one word, he'd have swallowed it. He'd have walked back into that office and figured out how to get you to quit over 6 months instead, and I'd have closed another file and you'd be gone anyway, and I'd have nothing. So I was bait. You were a witness, she said. You became baited when he grabbed your arm. Ethan laughed. There wasn't much in it. You know what he offered me? I recorded it. $26,400. I know what he offered you. You know what that number is? Yes, Diane Kessler said and looked at him. I've had your garnishment file on my desk since April, Mr. Walker. It came to his office and he was required to forward it, and he didn't, and I got it from the payroll processor, and I have known for 3 months exactly how much money it would take to buy you. The parking lot was very hot. Then you already knew. I'd say no. No, she said. I hoped. 22 years, Mr. Walker. I have watched $40,000 men do $60,000 things for $600. Nobody knows. Nobody ever knows until the money's actually on the table. She shut the laptop. That's what he was trying to tell you on the phone, and he said it badly because he's a coward about certain things, and he's rich enough that nobody's told him. But he wasn't wrong. There's no way to ask. Ethan stared through the windshield at the shop. Through the open bay, he could see Marty standing exactly where he'd left him, holding a rag, watching the truck. Where's Dale? He said. In his office. On the phone with a lawyer, I'd guess. He's going to take it out on Marty. Kessler stopped. Say that again. Marty Ellis, 19 years. He mouthed off yesterday in front of everybody when Dale took the biker's money. Ethan's jaw worked. He's got 11 months to retirement and a wife with a bad hip, and Dale's going to spend those 11 months skinning him alive for it. So whatever you're going to do it fast or don't bother doing it. Diane Kessler looked at him for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and hit two buttons. It's Kessler, pull it. A pause. Now, today, I want the sign off that building by Monday, and I want the parts account frozen inside the hour. Another pause. Because he terminated a witness in front of me, and because he's got $2,600 of customer money in his shirt pocket, and because I said so, that's why. Freeze it. She hung up. That's it, Ethan said. That's it. 4 years and it's a phone call. 4 years to get to the phone call, she said. That's how it always is. Nobody tells you the last part's easy. She got out. Then she leaned back in through the open door. Mr. Walker, do you have any idea what happens to the shop now? He loses the sign. He loses the parts network, which means he can't buy a warranty component in this state, which means every car on that lot right now, including a Camry with a wine in the rear, and that some kid is currently making worse, has to be finished with parts he can't get. She let it sit. 11 people work in that building. Ethan's stomach dropped. Ma'am, I know. Ma'am, Marty's got shit. I know, Mr. Walker. Her voice finally went just a little. You think I don't know? That's the job. That's why I'm tired. I don't get to take a man's sign without taking 10 men's paychecks. And I've done it 160 times, and every single time somebody sits in a truck exactly like this one and says, but Marty. She straightened up. Call him back, she said. And Mr. Walker, when he offers you what he's about to offer, you don't say yes in the parking lot. Why not? Because you'll say yes for the wrong reason. Diane Kessler said, and then in 6 months you'll be him. She shut the door and walked back toward the shop. He called Nathan Reed back from the parking lot of a gas station a mile away because he couldn't sit there anymore looking at the building. Mr. Walker? They're pulling the certification. I know. 11 people. I know. There's a man in there named Marty Ellis who's got 11 months till... Mr. Walker. Nathan Reed's voice was quiet. Do you want to talk about Marty Ellis? Or do you want to talk about the fact that you just hung up on me? Ethan closed his eyes. Sir, I've had a day. You've had a week, Reed said. Can you be at my office Monday at 9? I don't have a suit. There was a pause on the line, and then Nathan Reed made a sound that might have been a laugh and might have been something else entirely. Wear whatever you had on Thursday night, he said. He almost didn't go. That was the part nobody would ever believe afterward, but it was true. He sat up Saturday night and half of Sunday with his phone in his hand and a piece of paper in his other hand, the work order Jackson had pressed into his fist with a number on the back in handwriting like a man breaking rocks, and he did not call it. He didn't call anybody. He went out to the Ranger at 11 o'clock Sunday night and changed the oil in it just to have something to do with his hands. And at midnight, he was lying on his back under a truck in his own driveway, realizing that the only reason he had a driveway was that his father had left him half a mortgage and the bank hadn't gotten around to noticing. He went Monday. The building had 41 floors, and he parked in a visitor spot and sat there for 4 minutes doing what he'd been doing since Saturday, which was building an argument. Because here's what Ethan Walker had figured out over the weekend, and it had made him sick. If a Fortune 500 company wanted a mechanic, they'd call a hiring manager. If a CEO called a mechanic personally 41 minutes after his own field director watched him get fired, that wasn't a job. That was a use. He just didn't know what for yet. Nathan Reed's office didn't look like anything. That was the thing that threw him first. No wall of glass, no shrine. It was a room with a desk and a couch and a coffee table with a bad ring on it. And behind the desk was a man who looked so much like Jackson Reed that Ethan actually stopped in the doorway. Same jaw, same hands, everything else different. You see it? Nathan said. Yes, sir. Everybody does. He hates it. Nathan came around the desk. He was maybe 58, and he moved like a man who'd been sitting for 30 years. Mr. Walker, Ethan shook his hand and didn't sit down. Sir, before we start, I want to ask you something. All right. Why'd you really call me? Nathan's eyebrows went up. I told you why. You told me a story about your brother. Ethan stayed standing. And it was a good story, and I believe every word of it, and it doesn't answer the question. Because if a guy fixes your brother's bike, you send him a fruit basket. You don't call your field standards director at 6 in the morning. You don't tell her to let him get fired so you can watch. You don't fly her out on a Saturday. He put his hands in his pockets because they wanted to do something. You did all that before you'd ever heard my voice. So you weren't looking at me. You were looking for something and I happened to walk into it. Nathan Reed stood there. Then he sat down on the edge of his own desk and rubbed his face with both hands. Diane said you'd do this. Sir. Sit down, Ethan. I'd rather, please, Nathan Reed said, and something in the way he said it put Ethan in the chair. Nathan didn't talk for a while. You're right, he said finally. I want you to know that first because you're going to spend the next hour trying to catch me in something, and I'd rather just hand it to you. You're right. It wasn't the fruit basket. Then what? 1,100 service centers, Nathan said. 41 states, 38,000 technicians. You know what our customer trust number was in 2019? No, sir. 71, you know what it is now? No, sir. 34, Nathan said. We've lost half of it in 6 years. Class action in Ohio. Attorney generals looking at us in 2 states. And every consultant I've hired, and I've hired 4, at about $11 million, comes back with the same slide deck saying communication, breakdown, and training gap. And I sit in that chair and I look at it and I know they're lying and I can't prove it. And it's been eating me alive for 4 years. Why can't you prove it? Because the people who could prove it don't talk to me, Nathan said. That's the whole thing. That's the entire thing. Ethan and I couldn't see it for 4 years because nobody in this building would say it out loud. I've got 38,000 men and women with their heads inside cars who know exactly what's wrong with this company, and not one of them will tell me because the last 30 years have taught them that the guy who says it out loud is the guy who gets his toolbox. Ethan sat very still. That's why you let him fire me, he said. No. Nathan looked up. That's why I watched. That's the same. It is not the same, and I need you to understand the difference because it's the only honest thing I've got to give you. Nathan leaned forward. I have been offering people money to tell me the truth for 4 years. Bonuses, anonymous hotlines, a whole department, and it doesn't work, and you know why it doesn't work because you cannot buy the truth. The second there's money on it, everybody tells you what pays. So no, I couldn't ask you, I couldn't survey you, I couldn't put you in a focus group in Dayton with a sandwich. So you watch it, the man offered me $26,000. Yes. To see what I'd do. Yes. Sir, Ethan's voice was shaking now. That's my father's debt. That's not a number on a slide. That's 4 years of my life. That's the thing I think about when I can't sleep, and you sat in this room and let a man dangle it in front of me like a dog treat so you could get a data point. Nathan Reed took it. He didn't flinch, and he didn't defend himself. Yes, he said, I did. Say something else. There isn't anything else. Nathan's voice was steady and terrible. You want me to tell you it was a hard decision? It was. It was the hardest one I've made in 11 years, and I made it in about 4 seconds. And I'd like to tell you I've regretted it since, and I haven't. And that's the part that ought to worry you about me, and I'm telling you anyway because if I lied to you about this, then everything else out of my mouth today is worthless. Ethan sat back. Diane told me not to say yes in the parking lot, he said. Diane's the best person in this company. She said if I said yes for the wrong reason, in 6 months, I'd be you. Nathan Reed laughed one short, awful bark. She's right about that too, he said. And then he stopped laughing, and his face changed, and Ethan watched a man in a 41-story building turn back into somebody's brother. Ethan, he said, you asked me on the phone why Jackson's broke. You want to know? It's none of my... You opened a door for him at 10 o'clock at night. It's yours now. Nathan got up and went to the window and stood there with his back to the room. In 2013, my brother was the highest-rated diagnostic technician in this company. Not a shop. The company. 1,100 locations, and Jackson Reed was #1 3 years running. He didn't get that because of the name. He got that because our father put a wrench in his hand when he was 9 years old, and he was better at it than anybody I've ever seen, and I include you in that. He said he does his own work. He said, Nathan turned. He said that Thursday, I asked when he'd last had the bike on a lift, and he said, I do my own work. Nathan Reed's face did something complicated. That's exactly what he'd say, he said. God, yeah. He came back and sat down. In 2014, he flagged a part, a rear knuckle assembly on a fleet vehicle. He said the metallurgy was wrong, said he'd seen 4 of them, and they were all cracking the same way at the same place, said it was a batch. He put it in writing. He put it in writing 4 times. Ethan's stomach was already moving. And the supplier said no, Nathan said. And the supplier had a lab and 11 engineers and a contract, and my brother had a wrench and a hunch. And it was going to be $41 million to recall it, and I was 2 years into this chair. And the board, he stopped, started again. I'm not going to hide behind the board. I looked at the paper, and I looked at my brother, and I decided that a guy in a shop couldn't be right if a lab said he was wrong. What happened? March of 2015. Nathan's voice went flat. A woman named Karen Whitlock, 39, 2 kids outside Springfield, Missouri. Rear knuckle let go at 62 miles an hour. Ethan closed his eyes. We recalled it in June, Nathan said. 11,000 units, quietly. And when the lawyers came, they needed to know why we hadn't caught it, and there was a paper trail, and the paper trail had a name on it. His. Nathan Reed's jaw was working. He'd flagged it 4 times, in writing, which meant the company had been told and hadn't acted, and that's not negligence, Ethan. That's the other thing. That's the word that ends companies. Ethan opened his eyes. What did you do? Nathan Reed didn't answer. What did you do? I let them tell a story, Nathan said, where the flags were a technician being difficult, where he'd flagged 11 other things that year and been wrong about 9 of them, which was true, which is what a good diagnostic tech does. He flags everything, and he's wrong most of the time. And that's the job. And they took 11 flags and 1 death, and they built a picture of a guy who cried wolf. And then they said the reason nobody escalated it was that this particular tech had a credibility problem. And you signed it. I didn't sign anything. Nathan's hands were flat on his knees. I sat in a room with 9 lawyers while they explained it, and I did not open my mouth. That's what I did. That's all I did. For about 90 minutes, I was very, very quiet. The office was silent. He lost his certification, Nathan said. Not fired, that would have looked like retaliation. Decertified, which in this industry is the same as being told you can never do the thing you're best at again. Anywhere for anyone. 38,000 techs, and my brother's the only one who can't work in this business, and he's the best one, and the reason is that he was right about a part in 2014. Ethan couldn't speak for a second. And he never said anything, he said. In 11 years, he never, sir, he could have walked into any newsroom in America. I know. Why didn't he? Because our father was alive until 2018, Nathan Reed said, and this company had his name on it. And Jackson would rather be a decertified nobody riding a road king for 11 years than be the man who put our dad's name in a headline. He looked up and his eyes were red. That's my brother. That's who you gave your Thursday night to. He ate it. For 11 years he ate it, and he took jobs under the table, and he lost his wife over it, and he raised that little girl on nothing, and he never once. His voice quit. Ethan sat there in a chair in a 41-story building with his hands on his knees. You said the last 30 years taught them, he said quietly. Downstairs. You said nobody tells you the truth because the guy who says it out loud gets his toolbox. Yes. Sir, you didn't inherit that. Ethan's voice was very level. You taught it. That's not a culture problem you walked into. That's yours. You made an example out of the best technician in your company, and you did it so loud that 38,000 people got the message, and they've been keeping their mouths shut for 11 years because they saw what happens. Nathan Reed sat with his hands over his mouth. Yes, he said. And your trust number went from 71 to 34, Nathan said. Yes, it took 9 years to show up on a slide. Everything takes 9 years to show up on a slide. That's why nobody ever connects it. Ethan stood up. Where are you going? I don't know, he was breathing hard. Sir, I'm sorry, I need a second because I sat in a break room Saturday and told a woman I'd written down 43 invoices because Charlie writes quotes off a phone call, and she looked at me like, he stopped. She looked at me like I was the first one, and I thought that meant something, and now I find out there was already a guy. There was already a guy 11 years ago, and he did it 4 times in writing, and you destroyed him. Yes. And now you want to hire me. Yes. to do the exact same thing he did. Yes, Nathan Reed said and stood up. Ethan, yes, that's the offer. I'm not going to dress it up. I want to make you lead diagnostic technician at Aurora. That's our flagship. It's 91 bays. It's the biggest service center in the Mountain West. And I want you to do exactly what you did to Roberta Diaz's invoice 43 times a month out loud with my name on the door behind you. And when I flag something you don't want flagged, Nathan didn't answer fast enough. That's what I thought, Ethan said. No. Nathan came around the desk. No, you don't get to do that. You asked a fair question, and you're going to let me give you a real answer instead of a fast one. He stopped a foot away. I don't know, that's the answer. I don't know what I'll do. I hope to God I do it different, and I have absolutely no evidence. And the last time I got tested, I was 2 years in this chair, and I failed so badly a woman died, and my brother's been paying for it for 11 years. Ethan stared at him. Then why would I ever? Because I'm not asking you to trust me, Nathan Reed said. I'm asking you to make it so it doesn't matter whether you can. Ethan stopped. Say that again. You want to promise I've got nothing. My word's worth exactly what it was worth in 2015. Nathan's voice was rising for the first time all morning. So don't take my word. Take structure. Write it yourself, whatever it is that makes it so that when I'm weak, and I will be weak, Ethan, I was weak in a room with 9 lawyers, and I'll be weak again. It doesn't matter. Build me the thing that survives me being a coward. That's not a job. No, Nathan said, it isn't. Ethan sat back down slowly. How much would he said? 140. He actually laughed. Sir, $140,000 a year, plus we assume the medical debt in the first pay period, which is not a bonus and not a favor. It's a correction because your garnishment sat in Brunner's drawer for 3 months in violation of about 4 things, and our processor should have caught it. Nathan sat on the desk. Say something. Ethan didn't say anything for a long time. I want 3 things, he said. Name them. Marty Ellis. Who? That's the problem, Ethan said. That right there, that's the whole thing in one word. You just said who about a man who's been keeping cars alive for 19 years in a building with your sign on it. Marty Ellis, 19 years, 11 months from retirement, and your Ms. Kessler pulled that certification Saturday afternoon and put him out of a job for something he didn't do. Done. Don't say done that fast. Why not? Because I'm not asking for a favor from my friend. Ethan leaned forward. If it's a favor, it's just you being nice to me, and next time there's a Marty, and I'm not in the room, he's gone. I don't want Marty hired. I want a rule. You pull a sign, the techs in that building get first call on every open bay in the state, and they keep their seniority. Every time, whether or not anybody in this office knows their name. Nathan's mouth was slightly open. That's an 1,100 shop policy, he said. Yes, sir. Because of one guy in Denver. Because of every guy in Denver, Ethan said. There's 160 shops you closed. There's Marty in all of them. Nathan Reed sat down. Second thing, he said. Charlie. Who's Charlie? The quoter. Ethan's voice was flat. 26 years old. Never touched a car. Sits at a desk with a headset and types what a customer says on the phone, and it becomes a number. And then that number is true. And then a woman who bathes old people for a living gets told she owes $612 because a kid heard battery light. He held Nathan's eyes. I don't want Charlie fired. I want Charlie in the bay. 2 days a month, every quoter in this company hands on a car standing next to the tech when the tech finds the ground strap. That's it. That's the whole fix. Your $11 million of consultants couldn't find it because they never rode with Charlie. Nathan didn't move. That's the second thing, Ethan said. And the third, and Ethan Walker sat there for a second with his hands on his knees. You've got to tell him, he said. The room went absolutely still. Ethan, not me, not a lawyer, not Ms. Kessler with a laptop. He didn't raise his voice. You, out loud, to his face. You have to say, Jackson, you were right in 2014, and I sat in a room and let them make you the reason a woman died, and I've known it every day for 11 years. That's not, Nathan's voice broke on the second word. That's not something you can. You want me to build you something that survives you being a coward. Ethan stood up. Fine, that's the first brick. That's the only first brick, sir, because I'm not going to stand in a 91-bay building telling 38,000 people to say the hard thing out loud while the man who signs my check has been sitting on his for 11 years. Nathan Reed's hands were shaking. He won't take my call. He took it Friday at 4 in the morning. That wasn't for me. Nathan's face was wrecked. That was Ethan. That was a man who had nobody else to call at 4 in the morning. That wasn't forgiveness. That was arithmetic. I'm the only person left who's known her since she was born. Then start there, Ethan said. You don't understand what you're asking. No, sir, Ethan said. I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to walk into a room where somebody's mad at you and say the true thing when there's nothing in it for you, Hill. That's Thursday night. That's a door at 10 o'clock. He picked up his hat off the chair. You watched a man offer me $26,000 to find out if I'd do it. Well, now I know something about you too. I know you'd let it run. So here's mine, sir. That's my price. I don't want your 140 until you've done it. Nathan Reed sat behind his desk with his hands over his face. Give me a week, he said. Take 2. Ethan, he looked up. If he says no, if I do it and he tells me to get out and never calls me again, do you still take the job? And Ethan stopped at the door. Yeah, he said. I take it either way. It was never about whether he forgives you. He got out to the parking lot and sat in the Ranger and shook for about 4 minutes because it was one thing to say all that and another thing to have said it, and his whole body was catching up with his mouth. Then his phone rang. He knew before he looked. Some part of him knew. He looked anyway. It was a number he'd never called and had memorized anyway because it had been sitting on the back of a work order on his kitchen table for 4 days. He answered it. Jackson, where are you right now? Ethan's stomach dropped through the floor of the truck. Jackson, I'm going to ask you one time. Jackson Reed's voice was so quiet it was almost nothing. And I want you to know, before you answered, that I already know because Diane Kessler called me an hour ago, which is a thing that has never happened in 11 years. And she said something to me that I want you to explain. Jackson, listen. She said your brother's about to make him an offer, and I thought you should hear it from me first. Ethan closed his eyes. Where are you? Jackson said. His parking lot. The line was silent for a long, long moment. Say it again. I'm sitting in Nathan Reed's parking lot, Ethan said. I've been in his office for an hour. Since when? Since Saturday. He called me 40 minutes after I got fired. Saturday? Something came apart in Jackson's voice, and it wasn't rage that was the thing that gutted Ethan. It would have been so much easier if it had been rage. You've known since Saturday. You've had my number in your pocket since Friday. That's 4 days, Ethan. That's 4 days where I was walking around telling my 16-year-old daughter about the one guy in this whole world who did something for us without wanting anything, and you were Jackson. And you were sitting in his office. Jackson, that's not... Do you know what he did? It ripped out of him. Do you have any idea what that man, Karen Whitlock, Ethan said? Silence. Complete total silence. 39, Ethan said. 2 kids. Springfield, Missouri. March 2015. Rear knuckle at 62 miles an hour. And you flagged the batch 4 times in writing in 2014, and they took your 11 other flags and built you a credibility problem, and you lost your certification and your wife, and 11 years, and you never said a word because your dad's name was on the building. He could hear Jackson breathing. He told you that, Jackson said, an hour ago in that room out loud. He told you that. Yes. Why, Jackson said, and his voice was in pieces. Why would he, after 11 years, why would he tell you? And Ethan Walker sat in a parking lot with his hand over his eyes. Because I asked, he said. Because I asked, Ethan said. The line stayed open. Somewhere on the other end, a television played low, and he realized Jackson Reed was standing in a hospital hallway. 11 years, Jackson said. Lawyers knew. His whole board knew. My wife knew, and she still left because you can't stay married to a man who won't fight. His breathing was bad. Nobody ever asked me, Ethan. Not one person in 11 years walked up and said, Jackson, what actually happened? They all just decided. I'm asking now. You're asking with his coffee in your hand. I didn't take any coffee. You know what I mean? Yeah, and you're right. I had your number since Friday and I didn't call it. There's no version of that I can dress up. Why didn't you? Because I was scared you'd think that's why I opened the door. Silence. Say that again. I didn't want you thinking I got paid. And Jackson Reed laughed, and it was an awful sound. You idiot, he said. You absolute idiot. I've spent 4 days telling my daughter about you. She's got it memorized. She corrects me when I get the timeline wrong. She's 16 with a shave patch on her head, and she makes me tell it every night like a bedtime story because it's the only good thing that's happened to this family since before she can remember. His voice cracked. And you thought I'd be mad you got something out of it. I offered you my father's watch. You think I did that because I had a lot of watches. Then why are you yelling at me? Jackson stopped. Because it's him, he said, and everything went out of his voice. For 4 days, you were mine. You were the one thing in my life that wasn't his. And he got there first. He always gets there first. Jackson, I turned it down. Silence. What? 40 minutes ago. 140 a year, my dad's debt cleared in the first pay period. I said no. Ethan's hand shook on the wheel. He doesn't get 1 hour of my life until he stands in a room with you in it and says the true thing out loud. The line went completely silent. Why, I am, Jackson said like a man who'd been hit. That's your father's bill. You've known me 51 minutes. You said it wasn't a fuel pump. That's not, you said it wasn't a fuel pump, Jackson. So don't tell me it's about 51 minutes. He heard the man breathe. He'll never do it, Jackson said. He physically cannot say a true thing out loud if it costs him something. That's the entire man. Then I don't take the job. Don't be stupid. I opened a door for a stranger and it cost me everything I had, and I'd do it again this second. What makes you think I'd blink at 140 grand? A long pause. Ruby wants to meet you, Jackson said. Nathan Reed took 8 days. Ethan spent them in a house with no job and a phone that didn't ring. On the 4th day, he did the math on his checking account, $611. On the 6th, he filled out a paper application at a tire place on Colfax with a pen chained to a clipboard. The kid asked if he had any experience. Some, Ethan said. On the 8th day, Marty called. You son of a bitch. Morning. You son of a... His voice was doing something Ethan had never heard it do. Woman named Sandra Reed Automotive. There's a bay open at Aurora and I've got first call on it. He stopped. He was crying. 19 years and Ethan had never heard that. My seniority transfers, Ethan. The 19 years come with me. Ethan sat down on his kitchen floor. She said it's a new policy. Went in Tuesday. 41 states retroactive to the last 160 closures. They're calling everybody. Guys from 2019. Marty's voice broke. What did you do? I asked for a rule. I told him I didn't want a favor. If it's a favor, then next time there's a Marty and I'm not in the room, he's gone. Ethan's voice quit. So I asked for a rule. Marty couldn't talk. Denise, okay? Standing in the kitchen with her hands over her face, hasn't moved since I hung up. He laughed, ruined. I'd already called about the pension. Monday, gonna eat the penalty at 58 because nobody hires at my age. 11 months I had. 11 months, and he took it over a rag I threw on the floor. You didn't throw a rag on the floor, Ethan said. You stood up in a room where everybody was scared and said the true thing out loud. Kessler pulled that certification because he retaliated in front of her, and he was rattled enough to do it because a 58-year-old man he'd walked on for 19 years finally called him what he was. His voice went, I opened a door. You opened your mouth. Marty was quiet. You get the job. Working on it, I've got a condition. You've got a Ethan, you've got $600 and a garnishment. Marty stopped, then cracked, your father would be so proud he couldn't see straight. Nathan Reed called at 6:40 that night. I need you at St. Luke's. Now. His voice was in pieces. I'm in the parking garage. 2 hours and 11 minutes, and I can't make myself go inside. I've sat across from the Attorney General of Ohio and I can't walk into an elevator. I'm 40 minutes out. Nathan made a sound. What? Ethan said. 40 minutes, that's what he said at your door. Yeah. Ethan, I don't know what to say to him. I've got it written on a card. Throw the card away. He was already backing out of the driveway. You know what he had at that door? No speech. My daughter's in 412 and I'm 40 minutes out and please. That's all he had, and it cost me my job. Say the true thing, don't move. He got there in 34. Nathan stood outside the Lexus, no-tie gray-faced. Ethan took the card out of his hand, tore it in half, put it in his pocket. Fourth floor, I can't Nathan. First name. It landed like a slap. Your niece is 16 with 40 staples in her head, and she's never met you. She doesn't know I exist. She's known since she was 9. You think a girl with a 3.8 hasn't figured out her last name's on the biggest garage sign in Colorado? What if he throws me out? Then he throws you out. Nobody gets a guarantee. Ethan's voice went hard. I opened a door at 10 at night with no idea what was behind it. You're standing in a parking garage in a $4,000 suit, waiting for somebody to promise you it'll go okay. Nathan turned. You're a hard man. No, sir, I'm a mechanic. I find out what's actually broken and I say it out loud. The elevator opened on 4 and Nathan didn't move. The door started to close. Ethan put his hand out and a voice said, Nate Jackson Reed stood in the hallway with 2 coffees. You're in a hospital, he said flatly. You didn't come when Mom died. You came to the funeral, in a suit, with a guy. She was in a bed 4 days, and I called you and you said you had Cleveland. I know. You had Cleveland Nate. I know. So what's different? And Nathan Reed said, you were right about the knuckle. Jackson stopped breathing. Say that again. You were right about the rear knuckle assembly. 2014. You flagged it 4 times in writing. Nathan's voice held 4 words and then didn't. And you were right and the lab was wrong. And I decided a man with a wrench couldn't be right if a lab said he wasn't. And in March of 2015, a woman named Karen Whitlock died at 62 miles an hour outside Springfield. There were 2 kids in that car. Jackson didn't move. And when the lawyers came, the paper trail had your name on it, and it proved we'd been told. 9 men sat in a room and explained that the way to make it go away was to make you the reason. Take your 11 other flags and build a man who cried wolf. His face was wet, and he didn't touch it. And I sat there for 90 minutes and did not open my mouth. That's what I did. I was quiet. A coffee hit the floor. Neither of them looked at it. You took my certification. Yes. I was number 1. It ripped out of him. A nurse looked up and away. 1,100 shops, 3 years running. Dad put a wrench in my hand when I was 9 and I was the best one and you made me a liar. Yes. And I couldn't say anything because his name was on the building and he was still alive. And you knew that. Jackson's voice went to nothing. You knew I'd eat it. Out of 38,000 people, you picked the one who couldn't fight back, and you picked him because you knew his father. Yes. Say something else. There isn't anything else. Nathan's hands hung open. I've had 11 years to build something else, and there isn't any. I knew what I was doing while I was doing it, and I've driven past your house twice a year since 2019, your birthday, and Mom's, and never once stopped. And I told myself 11 different stories about why, and everyone was a lie. I was a coward in a room with 9 lawyers, and I've been a coward in a car outside your house for 7 years. Why now? Because a mechanic asked me why. He looked at Ethan. Nobody's asked me in 11 years. And then he turned down $140,000 and told me he wouldn't work 1 hour for me until I stood in front of you and said it. Jackson's head turned. That's the condition. That's what you meant on the phone. Yeah, Ethan said. Jackson looked at a man he'd known 51 minutes, then a man he'd known 50 years, and something in him gave out. I flagged it 4 times, he said in a boy's voice. Nate, I flagged it 4 times. I know. She had 2 kids. I've thought about her every day for 11 years, and I never even met her. His face came apart. And everybody in this industry thinks I'm the reason. It's going out Monday, Nathan said. Jackson stopped. What? An amended disclosure. My signature. It says the 2014 flags were accurate and weren't escalated because of a decision at the executive level, and it names the executive. His jaw shook. It's me, SEC, both AGs, plaintiffs' counsel in Ohio, every trade publication in this business. Nathan, Ethan said. What's that do to you? It ends me, Nathan Reed said simply. Board gets my resignation Tuesday. Best case? Worst case, Ohio reopens, and it isn't civil anymore. He never looked away from his brother. The lawyer spent 4 hours explaining what it cost me, All four cried. Over money, Jackson. Nate, and it restores your certification. Retroactive to 2014 with a finding the decertification was retaliatory. 11 years of back pay, about 1.1 million. Jackson dropped the second coffee. I don't want your money. It's not mine, it's yours. I don't want your money. It tore down the whole hallway. You think I've been out there 11 years wanting a check? No, Nathan said quietly. I think you have been out there 11 years wanting somebody to say you were right. Jackson stood with his hands empty. Then say it again. You were right. Again. You were right, Jackson. Say it like you mean. You were right. Nathan's voice tore through the middle. You were right and I was wrong. And I knew it in 2014, and I knew it at Dad's funeral, and I knew it every birthday I sat outside your house like a coward. You were the best technician this company ever had, and I destroyed you to save $41 million, and a woman is dead. I'd rather have lost the money. I'd rather have lost the company. I'd rather have lost everything Dad built than be the man who did that to his son. And I found that out 11 years too late. And there's nothing I can do except stand in this hallway and say it out loud. The hallway rang, and Jackson Reed, 50 years old, 6'4", thrown out of more places than Ethan had ever been into, walked 3 steps and put his arms around his brother and held on like the building was coming down. Ethan looked at a wall for 90 seconds. When he turned back, they were sitting on the floor with their backs to it like a couple of teenagers' coffee all over a $4,000 sleeve, and neither of them cared. You could have knocked, Jackson said raw. That's all it ever was. You just had to knock. Yeah, Nathan said, head back against the wall. Turns out that's the hard part. The door to 412 opened. A girl stood in it, IV in her arm, a shaved patch and a line of staples above her right ear, holding the frame because she'd gotten out of that bed against every instruction she'd been given. Ruby, Jackson was up in a second. I heard yelling. She looked past him at the man on the floor in the ruined suit. Dad, is that Uncle Nate? Jackson put his hand over his eyes. Yeah, baby, that's him. Nathan Reed got up off that floor like a man twice his age. 1,100 service centers, 41 states, and he stood in front of a 16-year-old with nothing. Ruby, he said, you drove past our house. Nathan went white. Every March and every November. Silver car. You'd slow down at the mailbox. Dad said it was somebody lost. She held the frame hard. I was 9 the first time. I'm 16 now. That's 14 times. Steady. I counted. He couldn't speak. Why didn't you ever stop? And Ethan watched a man decide in real time whether to give a 16-year-old the easy answer. Because I did something to your father I couldn't take back, Nathan Reed said, and I was too much of a coward to say so. And every time I got to that mailbox, I couldn't make myself put my foot on the brake. She looked at him a long moment. Okay, she said. She wiped her face with the back of her IV hand, annoyed at it. That's the first true thing anybody's told me about you my whole life. Everybody just says, it's complicated. 14 years of it's complicated. She looked at her father. You too, Dad. Jackson opened his mouth. You too. Yeah, he said. Okay, yeah. Then Ruby turned her head and saw the 4th person in that hallway, and her whole face changed. You're the garage guy? She let go of the frame and took one shaky step. Dad, that's him. That's him. You opened the door at 10 at night in the rain, and he had the vest on, and you opened it anyway. Yes, ma'am. And they fired you. Her voice went up and cracked. They fired you for opening a door so my dad could sit in that chair. And he was in that chair. I opened my eyes and my dad was right there. Ruby, Jackson said, and I've been laying in that bed 9 days thinking, what if he'd been 40 minutes later? What if I woke up in this room by myself? She was crying hard and Jackson had his arms around her. I'd have woke up alone, and I wouldn't have known why. You didn't, Ethan said. That's the whole thing, you didn't. She lifted her head. Dad says you wouldn't take his money. Or the watch. He says your boss offered you. She looked at her father. 26,000, Jackson said quietly. To lie about me. You said no, why? And Ethan Walker told a 16-year-old girl the truth. Because 4 years ago, somebody called me at 2 a.m. about my dad, and I was 40 minutes out, and I missed it by 16 minutes. His voice broke. I'd have said no for free. I'd have said no if he offered $1 million. They could have paid off every dollar I've ever owed, and I still wouldn't have stood in that shop and told a lie about a man who was in a chair next to you at 4 a.m. That's not me being good. There's just not enough money. Ruby Reed let go of her father, walked the last 3 steps, and put her arms around his neck. IV and all. Thank you, she said. He took the job. 11 days later. On paper he wrote himself. Diane Kessler read it twice, said, "This is the most annoying document I've ever seen," and signed it. Marty Ellis started at Aurora on a Tuesday Bay, 41, 19 years intact. Denise sent a pie Ethan couldn't eat because he cried the whole time he looked at it. Cole Rhodes called in October. Bruner Automotive had folded in August, no parts and network, no sign, no way to finish a Camry. Dale had sold the tools. Cole was pumping gas. "There's a spot," Ethan said. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity, it's a rule. First call, seniority comes with you, applies whether I like you or not." He let it sit. "Cole, you said no 4 times. That's not enough. It's what nobody else in that building did." Nathan Reed resigned on a Tuesday exactly like he said. The stock lost 19% in 4 days. He testified in Ohio in February and didn't take a deal. Ethan sat in the 3rd row for all of it. On the 2nd day, a lawyer asked him why 11 years on no investigation, pending no whistleblower, nothing forcing his hand, he'd ended his own career. And Nathan Reed under oath said, "Because a mechanic asked me a question." Karen Whitlock's daughters got a letter. 4 pages, and Nathan wrote it himself, and Ethan never read it and never asked. The older one wrote back. That's all he ever knew and all he ever wanted to. Jackson Reed got his certification back on a Thursday. He didn't take the $1.1 million. $400,000 went to Ruby's school and her surgeries. The rest went into something Kessler set up called the Whitlock Fund, which pays legal costs for technicians who flag a part and get punished for it. Its first year it defended 9, 7 won, and Jackson Reed, 50 years old, decertified, 11 years, the best diagnostic technician the company ever had, went back to work. At Aurora, in Bay 2, working for Ethan Walker. "This is stupid," Jackson said the first morning. "Extremely. I'm 50 and my boss is the guy who fixed my bike. You want a different Bay? I want a raise. Take it up with Kessler." Jackson laughed so hard he had to put a hand on the fender. On paper, it was called the Diagnostic Integrity Standard. Nobody in any shop in any of 41 states ever once called it that. They called it the Walker Rule, and Ethan had written it in 9 minutes at his kitchen table. No quote leaves the building until a tech has touched the car. Every quoter, 2 days a month, hands on metal, standing next to the man who finds the ground strap. And any technician who flags a part in writing cannot be disciplined, decertified, reassigned, or terminated for 11 months, no matter who says otherwise, no matter what it costs, no matter whose name is on the sign. 11 months. Ethan picked the number himself. Nobody ever asked why, and he never told them it was how long Marty Ellis had left. The trust number went from 34 to 68 in 3 years. 4 consultants had cost $11 million and found nothing. A mechanic with a toolbox in a condition fixed it for free, and it fit on 1 page. Ruby Reed graduated with a 4.0 and a scar she never once grew her hair over. She's studying mechanical engineering. Materials. Metallurgy, specifically why a rear knuckle fails at 62 miles an hour when a lab with 11 engineers says it won't. She told Ethan that at the party holding a paper plate. "Your dad flagged that batch when you were 4 years old." "I know," Ruby Reed said. "That's the point." And Ethan Walker went home that night to a house with a paid mortgage and his father's ratchet with a W scratched in the handle, and sat in his truck in the driveway a while the way he always did and thought about a Thursday. Because here's the thing, nobody ever gets right about that night. They tell it like he got lucky, like a poor mechanic opened a door, and a billionaire's brother happened to be standing behind it, and that's the lesson. Be nice to strangers, you never know who they are. That's not the story. Ethan Walker didn't know. Not Thursday, not Friday, not standing in that parking lot with a toolbox in his arms and $611 to his name. He opened the door for a man in a vest with a dead phone and $211, and it cost him everything, and he'd have paid it again. The name behind the door didn't make it right. It was already right at 9:52 in the rain before anybody knew anything. That's what changed a billion-dollar company. Not the coincidence, not the CEO, not the brother. A man with nothing left standing in an empty garage deciding the truth was still worth more than everything he owned. He opened the door. That was always the whole story.